Hey truckers, today we're seeing part 18 of I Have a City in an Alternate World. Let's dive into the video. Bloodsand City was famous for its blood-red desert. The area of the Crimson Desert was not very large, with a radius of less than 100 kilometers. Compared to the vast wilderness, it was not worth mentioning. Moreover, not a single blade of grass grew in this desert, and the temperature was far higher than that of other areas. One would feel rolling heat waves upon entering. However, this blood sand contained a precious mineral called blood crystal. It was a material for forging low-level ammo weapons. If the blood crystal was crushed into powder and mixed into the molten iron used to forge weapons according to the proportion, a translucent iron ingot could be obtained. Weapons forged with such iron ingots might not be magic weapons, but their edges would still be unusually sharp. The skin that was injured by such a weapon would heal very slowly. Bloodsand City's famous bloody killing war blade was made from this iron ingot and was very famous among the cultivators in the wilderness within 1,000 miles. The production of this kind of blood crystal was extremely low and had always been controlled by Bloodsand City. It was extremely rare to see it in the outside world. At this moment, wanderers and wild cultivators were constantly shuttling back and forth on the road in front of Bloodsand City, making it very lively. As one of the few Grade 5 towers within a 500-kilometer radius, coupled with the opening of the interdimensional passage, it naturally attracted a large number of cultivators and wanderers. Tangjin led a mount and mixed in with the human flow as he arrived in front of the city wall that Bloodsand City had built. Rather than calling it a city wall, it was better to call it a protective wall for the Wanderer Market. Bloodsand City was built on the edge of the Crimson Desert, and the Wanderer Market was right outside, which was considered a barrier for Bloodsand City. If monsters attacked, the first to be attacked would be the Wanderer Market. If he wanted to get to Bloodsand City, he had to pass through the Wanderer Market. If one wanted to enter the Wanderer Market, they would have to pay the price of a brain bead. Hurry up and hand over your brain. Can't you see that there's a line behind you? When it was Tangjin's turn, the action of digging out the head was a little slow. That wild cultivator collecting the fees did not even raise his head as he roared with an impatient expression. However, when he saw Tangjin clearly, he immediately swallowed the vulgarities that he was about to curse out. Even though Tangjin had deliberately suppressed his overlord cultivation, this low-level cultivator still felt like he was standing in front of a giant beast. A trace of aura that caused one's heart to palpitate was being emitted from Tangjin's body. Tangjin coldly swept his eyes over this wild cultivator. There was not a trace of emotion on his face. The wild cultivator felt his scalp tingle. A trace of cold sweat seeped out of his back, instantly drenching his clothes. Tangjin threw the brain to the low-level cultivator and pulled the bone plate from his hand. He then led his war beast and slowly walked into the Wanderer Market. After seeing Tangjin leave, the low-level cultivator let out a long sigh of relief. His face still had a lingering fear. Another wanderer walked over. This wild cultivator took a deep breath and continued to put on a stern face as he loudly berated the shabbily dressed wanderers. After Tangjin led the mount and walked for a while, he stopped in front of a small shop. Sitting on a simple chair, Tangjin ordered 10 skewers of barbecued meat and a pot of wild fruit juice. Tangjin's appetite was greatly stimulated as he chewed the meat skewers with a strange texture and the sweet and sour wild fruit juice. After ordering another 10 skewers of barbecued meat, Tangjin asked the young man who was busy with his work, "Brother, I want to enter the interdimensional passage in Bloodsand City. Can you give me some guidance?" When the young man who was currently turning the roasted meat heard this, he turned his head and said to Tangjin with a smile, "You've asked the right person. You should know that among the cultivators I've received, 8 out of 10 of them came for the interdimensional passage to Bloodsand City." The little brother barbecued meat passed the barbecued meat to Tangjin and picked up a bunch of meat skewers to continue smoking. Although there are many monsters in the wilderness, most of them are low-level monsters. Although there are high-level monsters, they are too scattered. If one wanted to hunt for high-level monsters in the wilderness, they had to look everywhere, and most of the time would be wasted on the road. That's why it's said that after a cultivator reaches rank 4, if they want to earn more brain beads, the most ideal place to go is to go to another plane. The barbecue guy spoke with fervor and assurance. It was obvious that he often talked about this topic with others. Ever since Bloodsand City opened this interplanar passage, it immediately attracted many cultivators. In the beginning, there were many low-level cultivators who came to join in the fun. Most of them had the intention of taking advantage of the situation and hoping to make a fortune from the dead, or get some precious ores and medicinal herbs, and then become rich overnight. However, after they entered, none of them could come out. Later on, these low-level cultivators gave up and all of them stayed in the wilderness. The remaining cultivators were all higher-level cultivators. He handed the skewers to another table's customer. Seeing that he was also very interested, the barbecue guy became even more interested in talking. If you want to enter the passage, you must pay 10,000 brain beads in exchange for a temporary resident identity card. This is also the passage token to enter the other plane. With this token, one could enter other planes. When he wanted to leave, he had to return to the entrance and use the token to return. If you lose the token, you won't be able to return, so you must take good care of it. After returning from the other plane, if you want to enter again, you'll have to pay another 10,000 brain beads. Bloodsand City has set up a shop to provide services for cultivators who enter the other dimension. Whether it's weapons, equipment, or food supplies, we have everything we need. After Tang Jin ate and drank his fill, he also had a preliminary understanding of the interdimensional passage in Bloodsand City. After paying for the meal, Tang Jin put his mount in the care of others and slowly walked towards Bloodsand City. It was a wonderful feeling to stroll around the enemy's tower area. The area of a 5th-class city had already reached a rather terrifying level. The Black Rock City that had once made Tang Jin gasp in admiration was only a third of the size of Bloodsand City. Furthermore, the architectural style of Bloodsand City was extremely peculiar. It looked like a huge pyramid. Follow the latest novels n/velbin.com. Compared to the Holy Dragon City, which was filled with the chirping of birds and the fragrance of flowers, there was nothing else in front of Bloodsand City other than a plaza. The pitch-black city buildings, coupled with the desolate blood-colored desert behind, gave off an extremely oppressive feeling. At the bottom of Bloodsand City, there was an entrance for people to enter and exit. 20 cultivators of Bloodsand City stood guard in front of the entrance. After seeing Tang Jin, these Bloodsand City cultivators blocked his path. Looking at the level 4 cultivators in front of him, Tang Jin could not help but admit that the average level of cultivators in Bloodsand City was indeed higher than that of Holy Dragon City. After explaining his purpose for coming, a cultivator from Bloodsand City led Tang Jin to a hall inside the tower. The hall was surrounded by counters with all sorts of weapons and equipment, as well as medicine and food. Everything was well prepared. The 5 cultivators were purchasing medicines, as if they were making the final preparations before departure. The hall was also guarded by dozens of Bloodsand City cultivators. After Tang Jin paid 10,000 brain beads, he received a passage token. Immediately after, a cultivator asked Tang Jin if he needed to buy weapons and supplies. Tang Jin walked around the counter. He was not very interested in those ordinary weapons and equipment. He stood in front of the medicine counter for a while. After buying some IV ointment, Tang Jin followed the cultivators of Bloodsand City and headed to the interdimensional passage. The interdimensional passage to Bloodsand City was placed in an independent room, and there were cultivators guarding the door. After entering the room, Tang Jin saw the appearance of the interdimensional passage with a glance. The so-called interplane passage looked like a giant ball of light that was constantly collapsing and shrinking, emitting a heart-palpitating aura. Tangjin walked to the front of the tunnel. He raised the command token in his hand and extended his arm into it. Tangjin inhaled a deep breath of air as he sensed the pulling force that was transmitted from his arm. He then took a step forward and entered. Here, I wish all my readers a happy new year, and money rolling in. Tangjin felt as though he had entered an incomparably long passageway. It seemed to be extremely far away, yet it would arrive in the blink of an eye. This contradictory feeling almost made people vomit blood. Fortunately, this uncomfortable feeling flashed past. When his vision recovered, Tangjin discovered that he was standing on the top of a tall earth mountain. Behind him was the constantly changing interdimensional passage. As far as the eye could see, there were incomparably huge ruins and wreckage. From time to time, the figures of monsters would flash. These monsters were huge and had a fierce aura. They looked extremely violent. They seemed to be the masters of this world, and the endless ruins were their home. Tangjin retracted his gaze and started to size up his surroundings. More than 20 cultivators of Bloodsand City were fully armed and guarding the passage. More than a dozen cultivators, who reeked of blood, were sitting cross-legged in groups of 3 to 5. Most of them were covered in blood. When they saw Tangjin appear, these cultivators who were resting with their eyes closed glanced at him. Tangjin tried his best to suppress his overlord cultivation to avoid unnecessary trouble. However, the aura that he unintentionally emitted still made these cultivators, who were at the highest level, feel fear. In their eyes, Tangjin was a peak rank 5 cultivator who was about to become a lord. They didn't dare to offend him. "My lord, do you need a map?" A rank 3 cultivator from Bloodsand City walked over, saluted Tangjin, and asked. "Map? What map?" Tangjin looked at the cultivator in front of him and casually asked. "Naturally, it's a map with a radius of 1,000 miles. On it are the locations of various dangerous places. If you get close to that area, you can try to avoid it as much as possible to avoid unnecessary danger." This cultivator had never seen Tangjin before. Therefore, he determined that this was the first time Tangjin had entered this foreign plane. Therefore, he patiently explained. "One map for 1,000 brain beads, we can avoid danger in advance, it's definitely worth it." After the cultivator from Bloodsand City finished speaking, he told Tangjin the price of the map. Tangjin nodded after hearing this. He took out a level 4 brain pearl from his pocket and threw it to the Bloodsand City cultivator. After the cultivator took the brain, he hurriedly took out a map made of monster skin from his pocket and handed it to Tangjin. This Bloodsand City really knew how to do business. They opened up the passage, sold supplies and equipment, and now they even sold maps. Just a single interdimensional passage could bring in a large amount of brain pearl income for Bloodsand City. This business was really good. In comparison, the Holy Dragon City's commercial district's initial investment was too much. Tangjin's heart itched as he watched. He was also pondering whether he should upgrade the main tower to level 5. In that case, a plane passage would also appear in Holy Dragon City. Not only would he be able to enter the other planes to hunt monsters at any time, but he would also be able to steal business from Bloodsand City. However, if he wanted to upgrade Lu Qing to level 5, he would have to sacrifice 100 million brain pearls, which was equivalent to 1,000 level 6 brain pearls. This was a rather terrifying number. Who knew when he would be able to gather all of them? Tangjin unfolded the map and sized it up a few times. After which, he folded it and kept it properly. After which, he did not hesitate to rush toward the ruins in the distance. The rest of the cultivators glanced at Tangjin's back and no longer paid attention to him. Diascover dated novels on NOV/E/Lbin.co. Every day, there would be people coming and going, and there would be people who would stay here forever. This had nothing to do with strength, it was more about luck. A cultivator's entire life was spent in blood and killing, so they were already used to life and death. The wind blew, and yellow sand filled the air, blocking everyone's vision. After Tang Jin ran for a distance, his body flashed and entered a pile of ruins. He tried to activate the teleportation. In the blink of an eye, he had disappeared without a trace. A minute later, Tang Jin's figure appeared once again with a trace of surprise on his face. I didn't expect to be able to teleport here. If that's the case, I can play even crazier. A trace of ferocity surfaced on Tang Jin's face. His eyes glowed as he looked at the ruins in the distance. A crazy plan began to brew in his mind. Tang Jin put away the items that hindered his movement and began to continuously walk through the ruins with a speed as fast as lightning. Looking at the direction he was heading in, it was the danger zone that was clearly marked on the map. Along the way, he had crossed paths with several terrifying Lord-tier monsters. However, Tang Jin did not provoke them. Instead, he quietly sneaked over. During this period of time, Tang Jin also encountered quite a number of cultivators and their remains. However, he still ignored them. He only had one goal now, and that was to head to the gathering place of the monsters, and then make a big deal. After running for nearly a day, Tang Jin finally approached the closest danger zone to him. Through the map's point of view, Tang Jin slightly frowned as he looked down at the huge ruins in front of him and the monsters that were constantly wandering in the ruins. Tang Jin shook his head secretly after checking the style of the building ruins. He was sure that in this alien plane, there had once been a civilized race that was not inferior to the original world, but it had been destroyed for unknown reasons. What was the cause of the destruction of a powerful civilization? Was it related to the interdimensional passage and these monsters that were wreaking havoc? Tang Jin didn't have the time to think about it. He still had many things to do. After finding a secret location, Tang Jin returned to his original world. After contacting Ivanov, Tang Jin asked him a question. Can you get nuclear bombs? The more the better? Ivanov was shocked. Although he had made his name by selling arms, he had never come into contact with such a sensitive weapon as a nuclear bomb. However, in the original world, there was almost nothing that money couldn't buy. Even things like nuclear bombs could be obtained by paying enough money. Ivanov had his own secret channels. Since Tang Jin needed it, he could just ask. After making a few phone calls, Tang Jin got the information he wanted. There were indeed nuclear bombs, but there were only 2. The number was far from what Tang Jin had requested. These 2 nuclear bombs were ordered by Tang Jin. At the same time, a large number of high-explosive explosives were also ordered by Tang Jin. After the matter was settled, Ivanov immediately began to prepare. This was an extremely sensitive deal, and Ivanov had to deal with it carefully and personally preside over the entire process. Tang Jin quietly sat on the sofa. His finger was repeatedly tapping on his thigh as he pondered where he should go to obtain sufficient nuclear bombs. He was going to make a big move this time, and a powerful weapon was indispensable. Since he couldn't buy it, he would just move it directly. He activated the Universal Electronic Tool and began to search. A large amount of data was filtered, and the information left in the end was basically extremely accurate. A map popped up with many red dots marked on it. These places were very likely to store nuclear bombs. Tang Jin stared at the red dots on the map. After being silent for a moment, he placed his attention on one of the red dots. This is the most likely location to store the warhead. It seems that I have to make a trip personally. When Tang Jin thought of this, he directly stood up and left the manor. The weather was getting colder, the yellow leaves were falling, the bare trees were shivering in the wind, and there were few pedestrians on the empty streets. Tangjin strolled along the street like a leisurely traveler. The foreign buildings on both sides of the street didn't attract his attention. In his mind, he had been planning how to sneak into the target location. The place they were going to sneak into this time around had a very high security level. However, it was unable to stop Tangjin from entering. He first figured out the specific terrain of the target location and the surrounding buildings before he hacked into the network system again. After figuring out the specific defense arrangement, Tangjin began to act. Tangjin, who had activated the quantum invisibility light curtain, quietly entered the target location. After that, he avoided the patrolling guards and sneaked into the underground facility. As though he was wandering in his own backyard, Tangjin easily cracked the security equipment and saw the target of this trip. There were more than 1,000 nuclear bombs stored in this secret base, and Tangjin took away 50 of them in one go. The disappearance of such a large number of nuclear bombs would definitely cause a huge uproar once it was discovered, causing the original world to fall into complete panic. If people knew where these nuclear bombs were going and knew that they were going to explode in the other world, they would not have any fear. All that was left was perhaps endless curiosity. It was a pity that Tangjin's actions were extremely secretive. Apart from suspecting him, there was no direct evidence to be found. After getting what he wanted, Tangjin left the place and returned to the Ice Bear Alliance. He also had to modify these nuclear bombs to ensure that they could be detonated remotely and at a fixed time. After returning to the Ice Bear Alliance, Tangjin found a huge warehouse and began to work. With his evolved ability to analyze and learn, as well as the help of the Universal Electronic Kit, Tangjin could easily complete the modification work. After spending nearly 2 days, Tangjin had completed the modification of all these terrifying weapons. After a short rest, Tangjin once again activated the teleportation. Tangjin walked out from a hidden corner. He looked at the dangerous area in front of him and charged in. For some unknown reason, these danger zones were home to a large number of monsters. Many of these areas were even Lord-ranked. If cultivators below the realm of a Lord were to accidentally enter this place, they would basically die. What Tangjin wanted to do now was to throw the killing weapon in his storage space into this place. In the beginning, Tangjin could still avoid the monster's detection. However, as he ventured deeper, more and more monsters appeared. Among them, a few were Lord-tier monsters. The mental strength of these monsters was very strong. Even though Tangjin had activated the quantum invisibility light curtain, he was still discovered by them. The monsters began to hunt down the cultivators who had barged into the area mercilessly. Tangjin completely ignored the monsters behind him. He continued to run and buried his head as he charged deeper into the region. A monster the size of a small mountain appeared from the ruins. From its aura, one could tell that it was a 2-star horde leader. Tangjin simply did not have the confidence to win when facing such a monster. Therefore, he chose to dodge without the slightest hesitation. This level 7 monster didn't seem to have any intention of letting Tangjin go. Instead, it quickly pounced toward him. The ground trembled as it ran. Behind it, there was a group of Lord-tier monsters and even lower-tier monsters. Seeing that the monster was about to catch up to him, Tangjin waved his hand and threw out the modified nuclear bomb. At the same time, he activated the teleportation function. After Tangjin disappeared, the monsters rushed up. The level 7 monster in the lead was trying to bite the nuclear bomb. At this moment, a terrifying aura suddenly erupted. A few 100,000 tons of nuclear bombs instantly exploded, completely enveloping the surrounding area. The ferocious-looking level 7 monster instantly vaporized, and its huge body disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only a crystal-clear brain that had been taken away by the shock wave. The monsters that followed behind were also unable to escape the fate of death. They were all burned into dust at the same time. A huge mushroom cloud rose into the sky, and the explosion resounded through the sky. The earth trembled continuously. To the monsters in this area, this was a devastating disaster. Many cultivators witnessed the scene and were so shocked that they didn't know what to do. Some cultivators began to run to the site of the explosion, hoping to obtain unexpected gains in the area of the mutation. Tangjin, who was the culprit, was currently sitting on a sofa and feeling the changes in his body. After getting rid of these monsters, Tangjin had advanced to level 7 as expected, which was a 2-star horde leader. A powerful force kept surging in his body, making him have the urge to roar at the sky. After waiting for half a day, Tangjin wore the modified radiation protection suit that weighed more than 100 kilograms and started the transmission again. At the center of the explosion, the radiation level was frighteningly high. Other than the shocking crater, the remaining building ruins had once again suffered a destructive blow. In some places, it was smooth like glass. Tangjin moved his body, which was wrapped in the protective suit, and began to search for the brain that might be left behind. In fact, the Fumi combat suit that Tangjin was wearing had an extremely strong radiation protection function. However, he still got himself a set of radiation protection suit out of safety considerations. After the violent explosion, there was no longer anything of value in the central area, so there was no need to stay here. Tangjin advanced even further. He attempted to use his mental energy to sense and determine the location of the brain. As a 2-star horde leader, Tangjin's mental energy could cover an even wider area. Therefore, he was able to quickly sense the aura of a brain bead. Tangjin's heart was filled with joy. Such a clear reaction meant that this brain pearl's level was not low. He swiftly approached the location where the aura was emitted. Not long after, Tangjin discovered the target that was hidden by the rock fragments and the dust. This was a brain that was shining with a brilliant light. The nuclear explosion did not destroy it, and it was intoxicating to look at. A level 7 brain pearl was equivalent to 1,000,000. For wanderers and ordinary cultivators, this was a fortune that could make them go crazy. However, to a city lord who wanted to advance to an intermediate city, these brain pearls were not even a fraction of the sacrifice. After storing the brain into the storage space, Tangjin continued to search. After setting off such a huge firework, Tangjin had to recover his capital no matter what. After all, the price of a nuclear bomb was extremely high, and there was a price but no market. Tangjin continued to circle around the explosion area. After spending a few hours, he finally found more than 50 brain beads. Some of the brains were harvested by him after he killed the dying monsters. Among these brains, other than 1 level 7 and 15 level 6 brains, the rest were all level 5 and level 4 brains, which were not of much help to Tangjin. He had increased his level by 1 and obtained close to 3 million brain beads. This was Tangjin's harvest this time. Such a fast speed of making money made Tangjin extremely excited, and it also strengthened his determination to continue lighting fireworks. As for what would happen to the plane where the fireworks were set off, Tangjin simply didn't have the mood to care. Other than the ruins and monsters, there were only the cultivators who could leave at any time. Since it was an abandoned garbage dump, it didn't matter if the destruction was more thorough. CHCK for US to rise on no/v/l/bin.c0m. Tangjin put away the protective suit and sized up the cultivator who passed by in the distance. He then turned around and ran into the distance. This other world was filled with danger. Tangjin didn't have the obligation to educate these greedy people and tell them what radiation was. Perhaps cultivators with extremely strong physiques could ignore the damage of this radiation? In the ruins of a collapsed high-rise building, Tangjin was indifferently chewing on dry food while constantly observing the low-lying ruins. This was a dangerous area marked on the map, where a level 7 monster was active. It was a 100-meter monster that looked like a mutated centipede. It was currently in the ruins, very quiet. Around the centipede, there were a few Lord-tier monsters. They seemed to be the underlings of this level 7 monster. Perhaps every area marked with danger had a level 7 monster, and that was their territory. If things were really like this, it wouldn't take long for Tang Jin to advance again. However, Tang Jin had also heard from others that the highest level of monsters in the alien plane connected to the level 5 building was level 7. Who knew what the mastermind behind this was thinking? Was it to maintain some kind of balance? After finishing the dry rations in his hand, Tang Jin stretched his body and jumped down. Bang! Tang Jin's feet stomped on the ground, and the rock under his feet was shattered into pieces. Tang Jin turned around and looked at the building that was tens of meters tall behind him. He patted the dust on his pants and quickly ran toward the danger zone. However, he had only run a short distance when a dozen foreign cultivators appeared from the ruins of the building and blocked Tang Jin's path. The hiding place of these foreign cultivators was very secretive. Even Tang Jin did not discover the traces of this group of people. Their actions were clearly a robbery. Without any nonsense, these foreign race cultivators waved the weapons in their hands and rushed forward, blocking all of Tang Jin's escape routes. Judging from the expressions and movements of these foreign cultivators, they seemed to be very familiar with this kind of thing. Only God knew how many vengeful souls they had in their hands. However, they had chosen the wrong target this time. They had no idea that the human cultivators before them had the ability to crush them into powder. Tang Jin's footsteps didn't seem to have any pause as he charged towards the blade of a foreign cultivator. Under the shocked eyes of the foreign cultivator, Tang Jin easily dodged his saber and then punched. The cultivator's vision blurred and his head exploded. The other foreign cultivators were bewildered as they looked at the headless body that slowly fell to the ground. Tang Jin looked at the bloodstains on his body in disgust. He took out a battle blade from his storage space and sneered at the foreign race cultivators. A faintly discernible aura began to spread out from his body. The alien cultivators' expressions changed drastically when they felt the oppressive aura. This Tao Wu is a Lord-tier cultivator? No, the aura of a Lord-tier cultivator can't be this terrifying. Damn it, let's run. Although there were Lord-level cultivators in the level 5 city, they were either the city lord or the elders who lived behind the scenes. They were all intimidating military forces in the city. These overlord cultivators were rare and precious, and he definitely could not risk his life. In this dangerous world full of unknown, no one could guarantee that they would not die here unless they were extremely lucky. This was also the reason why the foreign cultivators were so shocked when they found out that Tang Jin was a Lord-grade cultivator. When they realized this, the first thought that came to their minds was to escape immediately. Even though there were more than 10 of them, they didn't have much chance of winning against a Lord-tier cultivator. Therefore, their best option was to escape. However, they did not have any possibility of escaping in front of Tang Jin. Just as these foreign tribe cultivators turned around, Tang Jin was like a phantom as he entangled himself with one of the foreign tribe cultivators. Then, the second non-human cultivator, the third, and the fourth, Tao Wu, came. He could easily take the lives of these foreign cultivators with a simple swing of his saber. By the time Tang Jin stopped, his side was already filled with corpses. After shaking off the blood on the saber, Tang Jin began to search the corpses of the foreign cultivators. Unfortunately, this group of people were poor. Tang Jin only found more than 500,000 brain beads from their bodies. For ordinary cultivators, 500,000 brain beads was a lot. After keeping the brain pearl, Tang Jin continued to dash toward the danger zone. However, compared to the carefulness he had shown the last time, he was much more relaxed this time around. The horde of monsters would put his life in danger, but avoiding the pursuit of these monsters had become extremely easy. With the big fireworks that saved time and effort, Tang Jin's goal could be achieved a little earlier. 10 minutes later, another huge mushroom cloud rose into the sky and razed the area to the ground. Not long after, Tangjin's figure once again appeared at the site of the explosion. He was still wearing the thick protective suit. After searching along the ruins, Tangjin took out the map and glanced at it before heading to the next location. Only this time, his mode of transportation had been changed to a helicopter. Tangjin didn't want to waste time on the road. He was already impatient to gather the required brain beads. In the next few days, there were continuous earth-shattering explosions. Radiation clouds were gathering in the sky at an extremely fast speed. More and more brains appeared in Tangjin's pocket as he got closer and closer to his goal. However, the continuous super explosions had already attracted the attention of the cultivators. The 5 towers that controlled the interdimensional battlefield had already sent cultivators to investigate, wanting to find out the specific cause of the explosion. The land in this alien plane was about 4 million square kilometers, and the 5 towers each controlled hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of land. The continuous explosions made them feel uneasy. In order to upgrade to a level 6 building, he would need a large number of brain beads, and this space was the best way to obtain them. They sent cultivators to kill monsters in this world, and cultivators were constantly killed by monsters. After the cultivators died, there would be young cultivators who would grow up. As long as this world existed, they could enter it year after year. After so many years, some of the buildings had already accumulated enough brain pearls to upgrade to level 6, but they had no intention of upgrading their buildings. This was because once they completed their promotion, the other 4 towers that shared the same alternate plane would replace the monsters that were attacking the city and teleport over to attack the city. This was an extremely dangerous gamble, and if he failed, he would be doomed eternally. No one would advance easily without absolute confidence. Thus, using the alternate dimension to earn brain beads became the most important thing for these level 5 towers. Full 0W current novels on n/o/v/3l/b in.co/m. This was the treasure bowl of the 5 towers, and they absolutely couldn't afford to lose it. Just as these cultivators began to investigate, Tangjin once again arrived at a dangerous place with a level 7 monster. After carefully scanning the target area, Tangjin quickly rushed in. This time, I'll earn another 3 million. I wish my fellow readers that you can easily earn 3 million in the new year. 100 miles away from Tangjin's location, a group of foreign cultivators were hurrying on their way. They were covered in dust, and their faces were filled with fatigue. They had used up a lot of their physical strength after days of constant traveling. Fortunately, they were all level 4 or 5 cultivators, so they were probably exhausted. When I catch that bastard saboteur, I'll definitely pull out his tendons and bones. In the middle of the group, a non-human cultivator took out a map and glanced at it. His face was filled with ferocity. 2 days ago, these foreign cultivators had accidentally discovered that the continuous explosions were actually caused by humans. This discovery made them both shocked and angry. They were shocked because the explosion caused by this cultivator was so terrifying that it was almost enough to destroy the world. He was angry because after what he did, even the interplane passage began to become unstable. If this continued, even the interplane passage might be destroyed. Once the interplane passage was closed, not only would the 5 towers lose the best source of obtaining the brain pearls, they would also be forced to upgrade their towers. The reason for this was because of the strange laws of this world. The appearance of the interdimensional passage not only brought benefits to the level 5 building, but it was also a super bomb that started its countdown. After Liu Qing was promoted to rank 5, the interdimensional passage would appear, and it would exist for a century. After 100 years, each level 5 building would have accumulated enough brain pearls to be sacrificed, and they could upgrade the level of the building. At this time, even if you didn't want to advance, under the invisible laws, you had to advance. The order of advancement was random, and no one knew if they would be the first unlucky one to advance. When the unlucky one was chosen to advance to level 6, he would have to accept the attacks of the other 4 towers. They would either lose the battle and destroy the city, splitting up all their assets, or successfully defend the city and take over the assets of the other 4 towers. However, the first tower to advance would most likely fail. After all, it was facing 4 powerful level 5 towers. The remaining 4 towers continued to fight until the true winner appeared. This was an extremely cruel and bloody process, just like raising venomous insects. However, if the alternate plane were to be destroyed and the passageway was closed in advance, these towers would be in deep trouble. Every level 5 city tower was built at a different time, and the time when the interdimensional passage opened was also different. Therefore, even if the interplane passage of one's own tower was closed, the other towers might still be open. The gap could be a few years or even a dozen years. For these level 5 towers, this was a good buffer period for them to fully prepare for the battle. If the interplane passages were closed at the same time, they would immediately start fighting, which was something the nobles of the 5 towers did not want to see. Therefore, Tangjin, who had caused such a terrifying explosion, must be executed immediately. The city lords of the 5 towers had already reached a consensus through the cornerstone platform. They had to kill this destroyer at all costs. Countless cultivator battle teams were sent into this world just to kill Tangjin. 1. By now, the interdimensional passages of the 5 towers had been surrounded by a large number of cultivators. All the cultivators who left had to go through a strict inspection to prevent destroyers from snatching them away. In order to deal with him, the 5 towers had sent out almost all of their elites, and there were more than 10,000 fully armed cultivators. When this cultivator battle team discovered Tangjin's traces, they had already released a communication signal. It wouldn't be long before the cultivator battle teams from the nearby 5 cities gathered here. Tangjin was unaware of all this. At this moment, he was heading deeper into the danger zone and was prepared to light a firework. Read lat.stchs on n/v/l/b.i.cm. Before this, Tangjin had always been doing this. However, just as he was passing by the ruins of a building, a strange feeling attracted Tangjin's attention, causing him to stop his footsteps. It was as if there was something hidden under the broken building. Tangjin, who originally planned to leave after setting off a firework, immediately rushed to the ruins. After rummaging through it, he directly entered a pitch-black entrance. A huge piece of building debris blocked Tangjin's path, but it was kicked away by Tangjin. Dust flew everywhere, and a strange smell kept coming from the entrance to the underground. Tangjin stretched out his hand and pressed on the neck of the Femi combat suit. Immediately after, the combat suit extended upwards and covered Tangjin's mouth and nose. The originally pungent smell was filtered out without a trace. After walking forward for a distance, a large door appeared in front of Tangjin. This door had been sealed for a long time and looked extremely sturdy. However, it was still unable to stop Tangjin's footsteps. After breaking the metal door open with brute force, he was surprised to see a group of half-mechanical creatures. As the monster detector did not give any hints, Tangjin concluded that these half-mechanical creatures were not monsters. They might have been combat weapons created by the natives of this world, but they were preserved for some reason. The half-mechanical creature's appearance was similar to a monkey's. It was about 1.2 meters tall. At this moment, it was holding a weapon that looked like a gun as it rapidly pounced toward Tangjin. Continuous flames shot out from those weapons and struck the ground and walls around Tangjin. These bullets seemed to be extremely corrosive. After hitting the target, they kept making. Tangjin easily dodged these bullets and rushed to the front of these semi-mechanical weapons. He easily broke their necks. After storing the corpses and weapons into his storage space, Tangjin continued on his way. After another 10 kilometers, they reached the end of the tunnel, and there was nothing inside. Tang Jin would not believe that there was no hidden area in such a deep underground passage. When he thought of this, Tang Jin immediately activated his application to scan the area. He quickly discovered a special area on the wall. He took out the purple electric short sword and gently cut the wall. A piece of rock fell to the ground, and a smooth crystal was revealed. Tang Jin observed it for a moment before extending his finger to gently touch the surface of the crystal. The originally dull crystal began to glow slightly. Soon after, a series of strange words and patterns appeared before Tang Jin's eyes. If the cultivators in the world of Luqing were to face this scene, they would probably be at a loss. You need to enter the password for verification. If you get it wrong 3 times, it will shut down immediately. Tang Jin didn't know what other defensive methods they would have. He activated the Universal Electronic Kit and began to crack the code. These magical applications had never disappointed Tang Jin. A few minutes later, the crystal screen in front of Tang Jin began to operate automatically. The dazzling 3D words were rearranged and a 50-digit password was entered. After the password was cracked, the crystal screen flashed for a moment and then dimmed again. However, the wall in front of Tang Jin slowly opened, revealing a huge entrance. After he slowly walked in, Tang Jin discovered that he had actually entered in Doomsday Seed Bank. The so-called seeds here were not simply the seeds of plants. They represented hope and contained the technology and civilization inheritance of this race. In an empty field, Tang Jin saw semi-mechanical creatures that were in a queue. They were soaked in a kind of sticky liquid. They were all battle machines that did not know fatigue, but they were currently in a closed state and needed to be activated before they could fight. Other than that, there were also a large number of weapons, food, and a hexagonal crystal that stored all the technology of this race. All test NOVL on novelben/.cm. Just like the Flashing Gold tribe, the natives of the wasteland world were also prepared to rise again. However, looking at the degree of destruction of the wreckage outside, Tang Jin concluded that this place had been occupied by monsters for at least 100 years. The indigenous people were probably dead. Even if there were some survivors, they still couldn't change the current situation. After such a long time of knowledge loss, even if they found this place, they could not enter the warehouse. Since this was the case, Tang Jin would kindly accept all of them. There were countless materials stored in such a large warehouse. Tang Jin had to find a proper place to store them. These items would be transported to the original world by Tang Jin, and then the useful materials would be selected and transported to Holy Dragon City. After Tang Jin looked through the entire warehouse, he teleported back to his original world. In Ivanov's manor, the Ice Bear Alliance. Tang Jin looked at the document in his hand and nodded in satisfaction. The island in the middle of the ocean was now in Tang Jin's possession, and he could head over to receive it at any time. The main value of the island was the source of drinking water on it. Otherwise, Tang Jin would have directly built an island in the international waters. Now that the island had become a private territory, there was the best place to store the transported goods. After a little preparation, Tang Jin and Ivanov immediately took a plane and headed to the island. Tang Jin finally saw the island in the middle of the ocean after turning around all the way. From the sky, the area of the island was not large. However, this did not have any effect on Tang Jin. As long as Tang Jin was willing, he could instantly expand the area of this island by 10 times or even 100 times. The plane slowly landed at the airport. Tang Jin looked at the island once through the map's perspective and directly headed to the foot of a mountain. Ivanov and the super soldiers, who were following closely behind, saw this and quickly followed. After reaching the foot of the mountain, Tang Jin stopped and activated the terrain transformation plugin. The people standing behind Tang Jin were originally puzzled and could not figure out what Tang Jin wanted to do. However, in the blink of an eye, they were so shocked that their mouths were wide open. The mountain peak in front of them was rising at an unbelievable speed, reaching a height of thousands of meters in the blink of an eye. In addition, the area of the island was also rapidly increasing, just like a piece of bread being spread out with a rolling pin. In the middle of the island, a vast flat land quickly appeared. Ivanov and the others looked at the scene in front of them in a daze, and it took them a long time to come back to their senses. "Oh God, what did I just see? Is this Tao Wu the power of a god? Your Excellency, did you make this?" Ivanov carefully walked in front of Tang Jin and asked with an incomparably respectful expression. Tang Jin nodded and walked toward the cave that had just appeared on the mountain. The crowd hurriedly followed him in, their faces filled with respect and adoration. The interior of the cave was extremely large, larger than Ivanov and the others had imagined. There was even more vast space in the deeper parts. After walking around, Tang Jin gave Ivanov and the others a few instructions and then began the transportation work. Such a huge change in the terrain could not be hidden from those who were observant. However, Tang Jin did not intend to hide it from the start. From the moment he bought this island, Tang Jin would begin to face the entire original world and slowly show the world of Luqing to the humans of the original world. A large number of resources were continuously transported over by Tang Jin and piled on the ground of the cave. The number of resources was increasing. Ivanov and the others looked at the items that were filled with the style of the other world and were even more excited, their eyes full of excitement. Being able to follow a boss like Tang Jin, who possessed a mystical ability, and participate in a great undertaking that could change the history of mankind, this made them feel incomparably honored. There was no need for Tang Jin to say anything more. They immediately began the plan for the island's transformation and construction. The training base, the laboratory, and a series of other projects had also officially begun. As for the island's defense work, Ivanov and the others did not have to worry about it at all. Other than modifying a batch of super soldiers, Tang Jin would also activate a batch of half-mechanical biological weapons that he had just obtained to participate in the defense work of the island. If necessary, he would even release a large number of monsters in the nearby sea and sky to protect the safety of the island. If he could create super soldiers, he could also create super monsters. However, these monsters had many disadvantages, and he could not control them as he wished. The transformed monsters were extremely fragile and could not be compared to the real monsters in the world of towers. Their vitality was also far from that of the real monsters. Tang Jin had done nearly 100 experiments in Liu Cheng's laboratory, but he still couldn't find an effective solution. This was also the reason why he had never put the modified monsters into use. After spending a lot of time, Tang Jin finally finished moving all the materials. Tang Jin patted off the dust on his body as he looked at the huge empty space. He turned around and walked toward the ground. What he didn't know was that at this time, at the edge of the danger zone, there were already more than 2,000 cultivators from the 5 cities who had gathered and surrounded this place. However, they did not take the risk to enter the danger zone. After all, there were terrifying level 7 monsters and a large number of level 6 Lord tier monsters. If they rashly barged in, they would definitely suffer great losses. These cultivators weren't like Tang Jin, who had endless special abilities and could enter and exit dangerous areas like fish in water. Since the destroyer had entered this area, they only needed to wait with peace of mind. If he was killed by the monster, it would be something to be glad about. However, the possibility of this was very low, because the dangerous areas that the saboteurs had been to would eventually turn into ruins, while he himself was safe and sound. Therefore, the cultivators of the 5 cities believed that the destroyers would definitely come out from inside. However, in order to prevent themselves from being affected by the terrifying explosion, they all tried to stay as far away from the dangerous area as possible and then carefully hid. As long as the saboteur walked out of the danger zone, they would surround him and launch a fatal blow. If Tang Jin were to know about the plan of these cultivators, he would definitely scoff in contempt. This was because the safety zone that they thought was safe was still within the killing range of a nuclear bomb. Even if they had strong physiques and couldn't be killed directly, there would be endless trouble in the future. These cultivators were not aware of the horror of nuclear radiation, so they were all injured without knowing it. Tang Jin was not clear about what kind of consequences it would cause. However, as long as he could cause trouble for the enemy, Tang Jin was very willing to do it. There was one more thing that Tang Jin was also unclear about. One of the reasons why Bloodsand City had not taken any action to retaliate immediately after suffering losses was because they were afraid of the Holy Dragon City's weapons. The main reason was that most of the cultivators in Bloodsand City were in another plane, participating in the battle for a secret location. The cultivators in charge of Bloodsand City's defense couldn't be easily mobilized, which was the main reason why they hadn't taken action yet. For a low-level city that dared to challenge their ruling position, Bloodsand City would not hesitate to destroy it and then plunder its wealth. Although they were afraid of Holy Dragon City's weapons, Bloodsand City also had similar things, which were also their hidden trump cards. Bloodsand City had once found a batch of weapons that could fire corrosive bullets in some ruins. Because the number of bullets was limited and could not be produced, there was no large number of equipment, and they were stored in Bloodsand City. However, in order to capture the saboteurs, the cultivators of Bloodsand City had equipped themselves with such weapons. The cultivators from the other 4 cities also brought weapons they had discovered in this world to deal with this destructive person. However, just as these cultivators were suppressing their anger and wanted to tear Tang Jin's corpse into 10,000 pieces, another earth-shattering sound was heard. When the loud sound came, the defenseless cultivators were immediately hit. The scorching heat and dazzling light enveloped them completely, making them feel as if they had fallen into hell in an instant. The armor and hair on his body were set ablaze by the high temperature, and his exposed skin was severely injured. The cultivators who were looking straight at the dangerous area were completely plunged into darkness the moment the light appeared. They roared and scratched their eyes, but large pieces of flesh fell off their faces and hands, making them look extremely ferocious. The power of this firework released by Tang Jin far exceeded the imagination of these cultivators. A huge shockwave spread from the ground, flattening the surrounding building debris and burying some hidden cultivators. This process was extremely short, but it also seemed extremely long. When the world finally returned to peace, the surroundings became deathly silent. No one noticed that the sky seemed to shake for a moment, and then an indescribable power spread out. The unknown force completely enveloped the area of the explosion and then silently changed the cultivators who were enveloped by the shock wave. After another half an hour, the force suddenly disappeared, but the area covered by the explosion changed dramatically. In the suffocating dust, countless ghostly shadows were wandering around, constantly letting out frightening wails. They were the cultivators from the 5 cities who had survived the explosion. After the unknown force descended, they all fell into a coma. However, they had already changed beyond recognition. The cultivators' naked bodies were covered with large chunks of skin, and their eyes were blinded. The physical pain almost drove them crazy, causing them to constantly roar and run around. Although they were not in human form, they were still conscious, but they had forgotten who they were. They didn't know why, but the center of the explosion had a fatal attraction to them, making them unable to stop. The wandering cultivators turned around and began to walk toward the center of the explosion at an increasingly fast speed. Having lost their vision, they did not see that as they went deeper into the center of the explosion, the wounds on their bodies were constantly healing, and a layer of hard black shell was growing on their bodies. The closer they got to the central area, the thicker the shells on their bodies became, and they became almost invulnerable. Their eyes, blinded by the strong light, turned into a pool of blood and melted away. But then a pair of blood-red eyes appeared from their eye sockets. A cold glint flickered in those red eyes, and they were filled with the desire to kill. Their auras grew stronger and stronger, from level 4 to level 5, and from level 5 to Lord. There were also a few cultivators whose cultivation levels had soared and directly advanced to 2-star Horde leader. However, they were afraid. It should be they. This was because there was a brain that was constantly growing in the heads of these cultivators. They had turned from cultivators into real monsters. It was unknown if it was a coincidence or not, but the number of cultivators that had turned into monsters was the same as the number of high-level monsters that Tang Jin had killed in the past few days. There seemed to be an invisible force that made up for the loss of this abnormal monster. Oh woo! All the monsters let out a long roar and ran in all directions, disappearing into the endless ruins in the blink of an eye. After a period of time, Tang Jin suddenly appeared from the smoke and dust and began to search for the scattered brains. From the beginning to the end, he did not see the cultivators from the 5 cities who were hiding, and he did not know what happened to them. Just like the previous few times, after Tang Jin searched around the explosion site, he was prepared to head to the next location. However, Tang Jin still discovered some abnormalities in the process of searching. Although the explosion had buried too many traces, Tang Jin still found many scattered weapons. This was something he had not encountered in other areas. Could it be that someone wanted to rob me, but ended up being destroyed by the big fireworks? Tang Jin scratched his head with a face full of doubt. Something's wrong, something's really wrong. Looking at the number of weapons, there must be a lot of people. How could there be no traces left in the killing range of such an explosion? Discover W stories on no/e/lbin.com. Tang Jin frowned slightly. There was definitely something fishy going on when things were abnormal. Something that he did not know about must have happened. Moreover, during the process of searching, Tang Jin had found large pieces of flesh more than once. They definitely didn't come from dead monsters, but cultivators. Tang Jin's heart was filled with doubt as he left the area and continued to head to the next target location. Tang Jin maneuvered the assault helicopter into the sky. He had just flown a short distance when he noticed the abnormality on the ground. Hundreds of foreign cultivators appeared in his path and pointed at the helicopter. Other than the cultivators on the ground, a large number of cultivators appeared in the sky. They looked like yikshaws, and their huge wings flapped continuously as they rushed towards Tang Jin. The alien cultivators at the front had already begun throwing javelins at the assault helicopters. Tang Jin immediately realized that something was amiss. He unhesitatingly activated the cannon and began to shoot at the group of cultivators in the sky. The whistling bullets streaked across the sky and collided with the cultivators, immediately causing a large cloud of blood mist to explode. A dozen foreign cultivators couldn't dodge in time and were torn into pieces by the bullets. Their bodies fell from the sky. Seeing this, the remaining cultivators scattered in all directions to avoid being hit by the bullets. Compared to these winged level 4 and 5 alien cultivators, the mobility of the assault helicopters was much lower. After Tang Jin realized this, he immediately maneuvered the armed helicopter and landed in the ruins in the distance. He didn't want his plane to be damaged, so he had to put it away as soon as possible. When the cultivators saw Tang Jin run straight to the ruins, they quickly chased after him. The cultivators running on the ground looked up at the sky from time to time. After receiving the guidance of the cultivators in the sky, they also swarmed toward the ruins. Tang Jin stopped the plane on an empty piece of land and directly kept it into his storage space. After which, he quickly entered the ruins. The alien cultivators who were flying in the sky were shocked. Their eyes almost popped out of their sockets when they saw this. To be able to make such a large plane disappear without a trace, the destroyer being chased must have a storage equipment that was enough to make people jealous. They didn't expect to receive such a huge surprise just by hunting down a destructor. This caused the foreign cultivators in the sky to become greedy. As long as they could get their hands on the storage equipment, they would be able to obtain unimaginable wealth. They did not think that Tangjin possessed the storage ability of a holy master. This was because from the beginning to the end, they had thought that Tangjin was a very high-level martial cultivator. As for the Holy Dragon City storage application card, they had never heard of it due to the distance. These flying cultivators kept circling the area where Tangjin had disappeared, trying to find his traces. However, the area of the ruins was too large, and it was extremely easy to hide people. After searching for half a day, these foreign race cultivators still did not see Tangjin's shadow. This made them extremely anxious. At this moment, the cultivators who had been searching the ground rushed over and surrounded the ruins. The battle would start at the first touch. These cultivators were scattered in the ruins and looked after each other. The flying cultivators monitored the sky to ensure that the saboteurs would not escape. With swords and guns in their hands, they constantly searched for possible hiding spots of the saboteurs, their bodies full of killing intent. In the shadow of a certain ruin, Tangjin silently sized up those cultivators without a trace of expression on his face. As long as he wanted to leave, no one could stop him. After all, his current cultivation base was already enough to make everyone feel terrified. These days, the continuous detonation of nuclear bombs had killed more than 10 second-rank Horde leader monsters. This also meant that Tangjin's current level had already reached level 8, which was enough for the cultivators of the 5 cities to look up to. A grade 8 cultivator was also known as a 3-star Horde leader. This level of cultivation was enough to look down on an area. Even the veteran experts in the 5 towers might not have such a high cultivation. It was too difficult for cultivators to reach this height. However, Tangjin merely used a nuclear bomb to easily reach such a height. If he didn't have the magical mobile phone application, who knew how long it would take for Tangjin to reach this level? However, the highest level of the monsters in this world was level 7. Therefore, after reaching level 8, Tangjin could no longer advance. His only goal was to obtain the Brain Pearl. However, from the current situation, his desire to save energy had attracted the attention of Liu Cheng, who controlled the other planes, and had sent a large number of cultivators to hunt him down. A trace of a cold smile appeared on the corner of Tangjin's mouth after he had clearly thought about the cause and effect of the matter. If these damned guys didn't provoke him, he wouldn't need to pay them any attention. He would leave after he gathered the required brain beads. But now that they actually dared to play this trick on him, then don't blame me for being impolite. Thinking about how the 5 towers had been hunting in this world for many years, they must have accumulated a large number of brain beads. Tangjin decided to borrow them. As for the return date. However, before that, Tangjin still needed to obtain some information from the cultivators of the 5 cities, as well as the tokens on their bodies to enter and exit the passageway. After thinking up to this point, Tangjin's figure flickered and disappeared without a trace from the shadows. A non-human cultivator stared at the ruins in front of him. Just as he was about to go in and take a look, he felt his vision blur and he fainted. Before he could fall to the ground, a figure flashed by and the cultivator disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. 10 minutes later, another cultivator disappeared into the shadows of the ruins. It didn't take long for a cultivator who was tired from flying to rest on the ruins to be pulled into the ruins. The source of this content n/o/v/l/by/n. Hundreds of cultivators were scattered in the huge ruins. No one realized that people were constantly disappearing. It wasn't until a cultivator accidentally entered a house and found a pile of corpses on the ground that they became alert. To their horror, they discovered that the saboteur had killed more than 20 cultivators in front of their eyes. What shocked them the most was that among the 20-odd cultivators who were killed, 5 of them were Lord-tier cultivators. These 5 lords were the leaders of the cultivators from the 5 cities. In order to capture the destroyers, the 5 cities sent a total of 15 Lord-tier cultivators, 3 from each city. With these 15 lords leading the team, everyone thought that the saboteurs would not be able to escape. These cultivators had been cultivating in seclusion in the tower. If it wasn't for the pursuit of the destroyers, they wouldn't have entered this dangerous world. Unfortunately, the destroyers were not caught, and 1/3 of the Lord cultivators were killed. This made the cultivators of the 5 cities who knew about this shiver in fear. To be able to kill 5 Lord-level cultivators without a sound, it was clear that the saboteur's strength was extremely shocking, or he had some powerful means that no one knew. If such a cultivator wanted to ambush them, wouldn't it be easy? After realizing this, the cultivators from the 5 cities who had spread out to search immediately gathered together and were on full alert, afraid that they would be attacked by the destroyers. The cultivators of the 5 cities, who were originally aggressive and wanted to kill the destroyers, were now afraid of being killed by others. However, their worries were somewhat unnecessary. This was because the current Tangjin was already over 100 miles away. Tangjin had obtained the information he wanted from the 5 lords. It turned out that the 5 towers had mobilized a large force to hunt him down because they were afraid that he would destroy this world too much and cause the interplane passage to close. Tangjin also clearly understood the consequences of the interdimensional passage closing. Tangjin naturally had to make good use of this after understanding the connection between them. Out of the 5 towers surrounding Tangjin, 4 of them were from the foreign races. This was enough to prove the superiority of the foreign races on the continent. However, as long as it was a foreign clan city, it would be Tangjin's potential enemy and also a stumbling block for the Holy Dragon City's rise. The only human city was Bloodsand City, which was bound to have a battle with Holy Dragon City. It was either you die or I die. To Tangjin, the 5 towers all had a reason to be destroyed. Since this was the case, Tangjin was prepared to make use of this opportunity to directly destroy them. Tangjin thought in his heart as he rapidly ran. The speed of a 3-star horde leader was displayed to the extreme, and he was like a phantom. The direction he was heading in was the location of a foreign race city, which was about 100 miles away. The alien plane connected 5 towers that were separated by the ends of the earth together, allowing Tangjin to reach 1 tower in a short time. After leaving this place, Tangjin would need to run for at least half a month to reach the target location in the tower world. During this period of time, he encountered foreign cultivators who were searching for his location in the sky. Tangjin temporarily stopped and waited for these cultivators to leave before continuing on. Unknowingly, Tangjin had already approached the foreign plane's passageway in this foreign race city. He chose a location in the ruins and placed a time bomb. After suppressing his aura with great effort and ensuring that it would not leak out in the slightest, Tangjin quietly approached the interdimensional passage. At the same time, he began to count down in his heart. 3, 2, 1. Tangjin's eyes glinted when he saw the last number. He directly headed toward the tunnel. At the same time, a loud noise suddenly erupted from the ruins not far away. The cultivators guarding the passage were immediately attracted by the explosion, and some of them went straight to the site of the explosion. No one noticed that a figure suddenly appeared and directly rushed into the passage. In a hall somewhere in the Jiaoya Tower, the interplane passage was flashing slightly. It was a sign that someone had passed through. A figure rushed out of the interdimensional passage. It looked very abnormal, which immediately attracted the attention of the cultivators guarding the place. However, before he could open his mouth to warn them, he felt a chill in his heart and his life force was instantly drained away. The moment this cultivator fell, he saw his other companions fall one after another in the hall. Then, the figure of a human cultivator appeared. The human cultivator looked at him coldly and ran out of the hall. There's actually a human cultivator here. The Jiaoya Tower city is going to be in chaos. The moment this thought appeared in the Horned Fang race cultivator's mind, he fell into eternal darkness. Tang Jin sensed the aura of the brain pearl as he rapidly advanced in the huge tower. His movements were extremely secretive. Although his cultivation had already reached level 8, Tang Jin was not sure if there were any experts of the same level in this foreign clan city. Therefore, he had to act cautiously. He also had to be wary of those cultivators who were of a lower level than him. Tang Jin was extremely clear about the logic of many ants biting an elephant to death. He definitely did not dare to be careless. He was a fast cultivating cultivator. Compared to other cultivators of the same level who had experienced countless battles, his combat power and experience were far inferior. Moreover, they had explored the alternate dimension for decades. God knows if they had obtained a weapon that could pose a threat to Tang Jin. If they were to fail in an easy task, they would be in deep trouble. The most important point was that Tang Jin didn't want to reveal too much of his strength. He didn't want the other towers to know his true cultivation. Only by pretending to be a pig to eat the tiger would he be able to obtain the greatest benefits. If those tigers knew that he was a tyrannosaur, they would definitely run as far away as possible and would not dare to easily provoke Tang Jin. If it really came to that time, even if Tang Jin wanted to start a war with the surrounding buildings, he would not be able to find an excuse to be bullied by others. Tang Jin suddenly stopped in front of a metal door while his thoughts were spinning. A smile surfaced on the corner of his mouth. Liu Cheng's treasure room was found. The tower of the Horned Fang race was extremely large. From the outside, it looked like a giant statue of a foreign race, full of ferocity. It stood tall in the wilderness, majestic and mysterious. If an outsider were to enter the interior of the city tower, they would definitely scurry around like a headless fly without any guidance. However, Tang Jin had the assistance of the map and his mental energy was extremely strong. Therefore, he was able to easily find the exact location of Liu Cheng's treasure room. Your favorite ovals at n/vl/bin.com. The target had been found, and the next step was naturally to rob. As for the 4 horn-tooth cultivators standing guard in front of the treasure room, Tang Jin directly ignored them. Because they would be dead in a while. As he slowly walked toward the treasure room, the 4 cultivators looked over in the direction of the sound. As expected, they immediately blocked Tang Jin's path. These 4 cultivators were all rank 5. 2 of them even had demon weapons on them. They were looking at Tang Jin with vigilant eyes. As Tang Jin was wearing a cloak that covered his face, they could not see his true appearance. However, Tang Jin made them feel an extremely dangerous aura. This caused the 4 cultivators to involuntarily become nervous as they subconsciously unsheathed their blades. The tower is an important place, no one is allowed to approach it. The cultivator in the lead shouted sternly as his eyes stared unwaveringly at Tang Jin. Tang Jin stared at the other party and did not give any response. Seeing Tang Jin's indifferent appearance, the 4 cultivators immediately became nervous and assumed an attacking posture. Who are you? Tang Jin slightly raised his head and revealed a cold smile on the corner of his mouth. The person who will send you on your way. As soon as he finished speaking, his body rushed forward. The 4 cultivators were shocked and hurriedly brandished their swords and sabers. However, their sabers fell to the ground with a clang sound halfway. Tang Jin calmly passed by, while the 4 horn-teeth cultivators all fell to the ground. The 4 horn-fanged cultivators, who seemed to have no external injuries, had their brains completely turned into mush. Tang Jin didn't even look at the 4 cultivators on the ground. He came to the iron gate and waved his hand. Purple flames suddenly appeared, melting the hard iron door into molten iron. The huge iron lock fell to the ground with a clang. Tang Jin kicked the metal door flying and stepped in. He was immediately dazzled by the treasures that were piled up like a mountain. Ha ha ha, it's the right decision to come this time. Tang Jin laughed out loud. He unceremoniously kept all the medicinal herbs, brains, ores, demonic weapons, and equipment into his storage space. If the storage space couldn't fit it, he would use the storage application card and the one with the largest space. The storage application cards that Holy Dragon City sold to the public were of the two lowest grades, with a capacity of 1 cubic meter and 10 cubic meters. As for the storage card used internally, it could be big or small. Tang Jin's speed was extremely fast, and the large treasure room was emptied in the blink of an eye. This horn-tooth race had accumulated treasures from an unknown young man, and now, they had all gone to Tang Jin. If the city lord of the Jiaya Tower City saw this, he would probably cry like crazy. Chasing Tang Jin to the ends of the earth and not stopping until he died was a proper matter. After the mission was completed, Tang Jin immediately ran toward the interdimensional passage. He had emptied the treasure room of the Jiaya Tower. If he was discovered, the entire Jiaya Tower would hunt him down. Tang Jin did not want to be caught in that situation. Tang Jin originally planned to throw a nuclear bomb, but he quickly suppressed this thought. The strange situation in the foreign plane caused a trace of vigilance to rise in Tang Jin's heart. Therefore, Tang Jin would never use a nuclear bomb in the Luqing world before he figured out what had happened. You bunch of foreign races are lucky. Otherwise, I'll exterminate your entire race with a single firework. Tang Jin's mind turned like lightning. Not long after, he rushed to the hall where the interdimensional passage was located. There were a few corpses on the ground, exactly the same as when he left. Perhaps it was because the interdimensional passage was sealed off and no one was allowed to enter. That was why no one noticed anything unusual even after the guards had been killed for a long time. In this way, Tang Jin was given an advantage. Tang Jin threw down a bomb with a smile and leaped into the interdimensional passage. Just as Tang Jin's figure disappeared, a loud explosion was heard. The hall where the interdimensional passage was located was directly blown up, burying the passage. In another dimension, in front of the passage to the Horned Fang tribe, a figure rushed out of the vortex-shaped passage and then left without stopping. The horned teeth cultivators in charge of the guards were stunned for a moment. They shouted and chased after the figure that was running further and further away. Unfortunately, the other party's speed was too terrifying. Even if they used all their strength, they still couldn't even touch the other party's shadow. Damn it! Hurry up and teleport back to Luqing to see what's happening. One of the Horned Fang cultivators' leaders shouted, and another cultivator took out a token and teleported over. In the blink of an eye, the cultivator ran back with a long face. Oh no, our teleportation hall has collapsed. When I teleported there, I was almost squeezed to death. While the entire Jiaya Tower City was in chaos, Tang Jin was already 100 miles away. Haha, I've earned big this time. The number of brain beads that Tang Jin had to work hard to make up was not even 1/10 of the total number of treasure in the Jiaya building. From this, one could see how rich the Jiaya building was. This was only the number of brains, and the value of the other treasures had not yet been calculated. The gains from the Jiaya Tower City alone were enough to upgrade Holy Dragon City to level 5. The more Tang Jin thought about it, the more excited he became. His eyes also began to turn bloodshot. Damn it! It's faster to rob the treasure rooms in these towers. If that's the case, none of the other 4 towers can escape. Tang Jin let out a long hiss when he thought of this, and his running speed increased a little. He had to be fast and act before the other buildings could react. Otherwise, once the other party became alert, the difficulty would increase. After realizing this point, Tang Jin continued to rush forward without stopping and finally approached the vicinity of the second foreign tribe city. This time, Tang Jin used the same old trick again. While the attention of the foreign race cultivators was attracted by the time bomb, he rushed into the passage like lightning. However, after charging into the tower this time, the masked Tangjin ran into a group of foreign cultivators and the two sides directly collided. After a few seconds of shock, a great battle broke out. Tangjin brandished a battle blade. Under the encirclement of a group of cultivators, blood splattered everywhere as wails continuously sounded out. Every attack would take a life. Even if those foreign cultivators were to join forces, they still wouldn't be a match for Tangjin. In less than a minute, he had finished off all of them. However, this was their base camp after all. Even if most of the cultivators were chasing after Tangjin in the other dimension, there were still many cultivators left behind to guard their base. The moment the two sides started fighting, it was equivalent to opening a hornet's nest. A huge battle was inevitable. The entire Scarlet Qilin Tower was filled with the sound of an alarm. It was shrill and ear-piercing. When the cultivators who stayed behind heard the alarm, they all put down their work and rushed towards Tangjin's position with their swords without hesitation. Tangjin felt his scalp turning numb as he looked at the densely packed cultivators that were rushing over. However, since he had already killed his way here, he had to bring back some spoils of war no matter what. Otherwise, wouldn't he have made a wasted trip? After thinking up to this point, Tangjin started to randomly throw bombs in all directions, causing intense explosions to continuously ring out. The entire Luqing city fell into chaos. Dust flew everywhere, cultivators wailed, and all kinds of curses were heard. Tangjin killed as he charged, heading toward the location of the treasure room that he sensed. Two Lord-ranked cultivators suddenly appeared. They blocked Tangjin's path and charged forward with demonic weapons in their hands. So what if he's a Lord cultivator? I'll kill him all the same. Tangjin's eyes turned red as he charged towards the two Overlord cultivators and killed one of them with a swing of his blade. Seeing Tangjin's power, the other Lord cultivator was so scared that he quickly retreated. To be able to kill a Lord cultivator so easily, the other party's strength was unfathomable. Unfortunately, Tangjin did not give him the chance to escape. He lifted his leg and gently kicked the demon saber on the ground. The saber was like lightning as it shot towards the back of the other party. Pfft! The extremely sharp demon saber pierced through the Lord's heart and nailed him to the wall. Ha ha ha, who else is there? Tangjin turned around and roared. His state was like that of a mad demon, and it actually frightened the pursuers behind him to the point that they repeatedly retreated. At this moment, more than 10 grenade-like objects were thrown over. Tangjin waved his arms and a wave of air pushed these objects back, causing them to land on the heads of the pursuers. 7 sit envelb/n, c/m for L test vels. Boom! A violent explosion rang out, and the grenade-like object splattered out countless liquid. This sticky liquid was extremely domineering, burning the walls with a sizzling sound, and green smoke lingered. The non-humankind cultivators who were splashed by the liquid were in bad luck. Their armors and clothes were all burned through by the liquid, and countless bloody holes were left on their skin and flesh. Wails of pain and misery rang out everywhere. Tangjin was secretly speechless after seeing this. He did not expect that this kind of strong acid bomb was actually so abnormal. This kind of bomb was a weapon obtained by the Qilin clan's cultivators in an alien plane. Tangjin had also obtained many of them, but he had never had the opportunity to use them. Seeing that the scene had fallen into chaos, how could Tangjin miss such a good opportunity? He casually took out a large bomb and threw it towards the corridor. After a loud noise, the tunnel collapsed, blocking the pursuers behind. Tangjin turned his head and took a glance before continuing to kill his way forward. Along the way, Tangjin finally killed his way to the vicinity of the treasure room. He finally saw the foreign cultivator with the highest cultivation so far. This was a rather old man. He didn't look very impressive, but from his aura, one could determine that he was a 2-star horde leader. This must be the strongest expert in the Scarlet Qilin Tower City. Good, good, I can handle it. Tang Jin glanced at the old man and the 3 Lord cultivators behind him before walking over in large strides. This friend, I wonder if my Qilin clan has offended you in any way, could you please explain? The old man was unable to see through Tang Jin's cultivation. However, he could faintly sense that Tang Jin was stronger than him. Although the fury in his heart was boundless, this old man still did not dare to rashly act. He only hoped to be able to force Tang Jin to back off. If he were to fight with Tang Jin, it would be fine if he won. However, if he lost, Lu Qing would be in a difficult situation. As a level 7 cultivator, he was like the stabilizing force of the city, intimidating other forces who had ill intentions. This old man had scruples in his heart and did not dare to rashly make a move. However, Tang Jin did not feel any pressure. He only had one goal in coming here, and that was to empty out all the treasures of the Qilin clan. You have indeed offended me. As punishment, I want you to compensate me with all the brains in Lu Qing. Tang Jin's words caused the old man's expression to change drastically. A trace of ruthlessness appeared on his face. What an arrogant tone! How dare you think about my Lu Qing's treasure room? I just don't know if you have the ability to do so. As soon as the old man's voice fell, the 3 Lord cultivators behind him immediately activated their cultivation skills and pounced toward Tang Jin. Good! A layer of deep blue ice armor suddenly appeared on the surface of Tang Jin's body. A sharp ice blade that was 2.5 meters long appeared in his hand. Tang Jin's ice blade fiercely swung out as he faced the attacks of the 3 Overlord cultivators. The 4 of them, including the old man, had a drastic change in expression when they felt the sharp aura that was coming at them. This is a 3-star horde leader of Baiyan. After realizing this, the 4 of them felt extremely bitter. How could they stop a rank 8 cultivator from robbing them? Do you still have any shame? As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, a sharp ice blade had already attacked him. The non-human cultivator at the front was cut in half by the ice blade. The ice blade didn't stop and continued to hit the other 2 cultivators. Crack! The ice blade shattered, but a terrifying wound was cut open on the 2 men's bodies, and blood kept flowing out. The 2 cultivators retreated in horror. At the same time, they quickly controlled their muscles to seal the wounds so that their organs would not flow out. As soon as the 2 sides exchanged blows, 1 died and 2 were seriously injured. The old man's expression changed drastically. He immediately became extremely cautious after realizing that Tang Jin's cultivation was higher than his. Seeing that his 3 cultivators had been defeated, the old man had no choice but to charge forward no matter how cautious he was. The speed of a rank 7 cultivator was far beyond that of an ordinary lord. The old man arrived in front of Tang Jin in an instant. Swish! 2 1-foot-long demonic battle blades appeared in the old man's hands as he attacked Tang Jin's vital points. Tang Jin was on guard. After avoiding the old man's fierce attack, he took out the purple lightning short sword and slashed it over. The old man subconsciously raised his demon weapon to block while the other demon weapon stabbed straight at Tang Jin's chest. Crack! The old man heard a soft sound and felt the power to block suddenly disappear. He turned his head reflexively and was scared out of his wits. The demonic saber that had accompanied him for dozens of years had already been neatly cut into 2. The purple lightning short sword in Tang Jin's hand did not stop as it headed straight for the old man's throat. The blade of the short sword was less than an inch away from the old man's skin. A weapon that could easily cut through a demon blade could definitely cut through the old man's neck. In the face of a life and death crisis, the old man shouted and his body actually retreated a foot out of thin air, avoiding this fierce attack. However, Tangjin's following kick had directly landed on the old man's chest. Ka-ba! A crisp sound came from the old man's chest, and his clothes turned into powder and fell to the ground, revealing the fiery red armor on his chest. This guy was really afraid of death. Under his clothes, he was wearing a set of MO chest armor. Although he had relied on the demon armor to absorb most of the force, Tangjin's kick still caused the old man's internal organs to shift, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. The old man took a deep breath, suppressed his turbulent blood and chi, and activated his cultivator skills to pounce again. His cultivation technique was very strange. 10 1-foot-long black light beams shot out from his fingertips, carrying a cold aura and wisps of mist. Tangjin was not willing to show weakness when he saw this. A purple flame that was over a meter long shot out from his hand. The temperature of the purple flame was extremely high. The moment it appeared, the surrounding air seemed to be ignited, and the heat wave was pressing. The corpse of the cultivator that Tangjin had killed emitted a sizzling sound as it was being roasted by the flames. Such an overbearing flame shocked the remaining three. The old man and the two heavily injured cultivators looked at each other with a trace of determination in their eyes. Kill! The three cultivators let out a furious roar at the same time and charged toward Tangjin while facing the heat wave. However, looking at the movements of these two lord cultivators, it was clear that they were going to fight for their lives. They actually directly pounced towards Tangjin's purple flame saber. That old man followed closely behind. His 10 fingers flickered with black light as he grabbed at Tangjin's vital points. The two of them risked their lives to protect him while the old man was responsible for attacking. Tangjin hurriedly dodged when he saw this. At the same time, a shocking heat wave rose from his dark blue ice armor. Ice and fire had actually fused together perfectly at this moment. The cultivator closest to Tangjin screamed. His entire body immediately turned into a burning torch, emitting a burning sound that made one's scalp tingle. However, the other party still did not have any intention of retreating. Instead, he directly pounced on Tangjin's body. The moment he got close to Tangjin, the cultivator was already roasted into a dry corpse and then rapidly carbonized. However, his death had given the old man a chance. That old man's jet-black sharp claws suddenly pierced into Tangjin's chest, tearing apart his leather clothes and creating 5 terrifying wounds. The skin and flesh around the wound turned into ice crystals and were frozen solid. Tangjin hurriedly retreated, avoiding the danger of his intestines being cut open. If it wasn't for his lack of combat experience, Tangjin would not have suffered such a huge loss. Sensing the change in his body, Tangjin furiously roared as the purple flames on his body instantly erupted. The purple flames filled the entire passage and engulfed the retreating old man and the lord cultivators who were pouncing on him. With 2 screams, the old man and the lord cultivator immediately turned into fireballs, struggling and running. Top VL updates on n/o/v/lb/in.com. Tangjin felt that his chest had already lost all feeling. That old man's cultivator skill had caused all the skin and flesh on his chest to be frostbitten. Go to hell! Tangjin waved his flaming fist and smashed the lord cultivator who was blocking his way. After that, he rushed to the front of the old man. Purple flames and ice blades appeared in Tangjin's hands at the same time, directly piercing the old man's body. Through the flames, Tangjin could clearly see the old man's charred and distorted face. His dried eyes were filled with shock and resentment. Plop! Tangjin threw away the old man's corpse. He turned around to look at the door of the treasure room and kicked it open. After keeping the purple flames and the ice armor, Tangjin stepped into the treasure room and began to search wantonly. After clearing the entire treasure room, Tangjin swallowed a piece of ivy ointment. After which, he controlled the purple flame to approach the wound. Wisps of black-colored cold air flew out from Tangjin's skin and flesh. A trace of pain also came from his chest that had lost all feeling. However, the flesh near the wound had already turned black and rotted. It was obvious that it had rotted after frostbite. He used the purple electric short sword to cut off the rotten flesh, revealing the white bone armor on his chest, which looked extremely ferocious. Tang Jin took out an IV ointment and carefully applied it on his wound. A numbing and itchy feeling immediately assaulted him. This kind of ointment only had a good healing effect on the aboriginals of the Tower World. However, when Tang Jin used it, it had a magical effect and the healing speed was extremely shocking. Therefore, the IV ointment was the most common medicine that Tang Jin had brought with him. After treating the wound, Tang Jin took a deep breath and rushed downstairs with his saber. Another battle ensued. The Scarlet Qilin Tower, which had lost 5 lords and a 2-star lord, was no longer able to stop Tang Jin. Swaggering through the interdimensional passage, Tang Jin engaged in another fierce battle and killed all the Qilin clan's cultivators guarding the passage. Not long after he left, the remaining 3 towers received the news one after another, and they also knew what had happened to 2 towers. Compared to the city's treasure vault that had been ransacked, the Scarlet Qilin race's city that had lost several overlord cultivators only lost a few ordinary cultivators. The Horned Fang race's city that had its treasure vault emptied out was already very lucky. After losing so many overlord-grade cultivators, the Scarlet Qilin Tower's days were not going to be good. However, these 3 towers didn't know that even the #1 expert of the Scarlet Qilin Tower had been killed. As the Scarlet Qilin Tower had sealed off the news of this, they didn't know the entire process of the battle. If the outside world knew that a 2-star horde leader had been killed, the Scarlet Qilin Tower would really be in danger. After analyzing the situation, the lords of these Luqian concluded that the person who had robbed their treasure room was the one they had been chasing. From the numerous battles he had with this destroyer, he was at least a 2-star horde leader. Then, after he ransacked the 2 towers, would he also target him? After thinking up to this point, the remaining 3 city lords couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. Being targeted by an expert of this cultivation level made them unable to sleep and eat in peace. In order to ensure that their towers would not be robbed, they began to rack their brains to come up with countermeasures. First, he had to move the treasures in the building, then use all sorts of methods to shield the energy from the brain pearl to ensure that it wouldn't be detected by the destroyers. The next step was to deploy a large number of troops inside and outside the passage, and when the destroyers arrived, they would give them a head-on blow. The cultivators of Luqing who were searching in the alien plane had also received a message from the Lightning Bird, asking them to retreat immediately to help defend the city. After the cultivators from the 5 cities, who had been searching for a long time in the ruins, received the news, they immediately jumped up in anger. Never in their dreams would they have thought that the destroyers would break through their heavy blockade and run to the cultivators' hideout to cause trouble. When they heard that the saboteur had emptied the treasure rooms of 2 towers and killed several cultivators of the Lord, some were shocked, some were delighted, but most were shocked. Especially the cultivators in the Horn-Tooth Tower and the Scarlet Qilin Tower, they all wished to tear Tang Jin apart alive. Without any hesitation, the cultivators of the 5 cities dodged and began to return to their own towers through the interdimensional passage. Just as they split up, the monsters that had been hiding in the dark and had not moved all this time suddenly launched an attack. Among the attacking monsters, there was a humanoid monster that the cultivators of the 5 cities had never seen before. Their bodies were covered with an impenetrable black shell, and they moved extremely fast. Many of them were Lord-tier monsters. These humanoid monsters were extremely powerful and experienced. Cultivators of the same level were no match for them. The most important thing was that these humanoid monsters could actually control the beast monsters. Not only could they control them to fight, but they could also control them freely. The cultivators of the 5 cities had never encountered such a situation before. They immediately suffered heavy losses and countless casualties. Without any other choice, the scattered cultivators from the 5 cities could only unite again and resist the monster's attack. The 5 towers that were originally in a hostile state had no choice but to cooperate again because of Tangjin's appearance. At this moment, Tangjin had already arrived at the entrance of another foreign tribe building. Tangjin was hiding in the ruins as he stared at the tunnel in front of him without blinking. Because he had robbed 2 towers of their treasure vaults, the towers of the foreign races who had received the news reacted quickly. At this time, a large number of troops had already gathered in front of the interdimensional passage. These foreign cultivators were fully armed and stood in groups of 3 to 5, guarding against the arrival of the saboteur. Tangjin saw a large number of weapons from this wasteland world in the hands of these foreign cultivators. There were strange acid rifles, acid bombs, and even acid cannons. He did not know why the natives of this world loved this kind of weapon so much. Perhaps to them only this kind of weapon could cause the greatest damage. In order to deal with Tangjin, this non-human city had taken out all the weapons it had stored. Tangjin was in a difficult position. Should he snatch this city or not when faced with such a situation? Under normal circumstances, Tangjin only needed to place a firework and all these people blocking the door would be wiped out. However, Tangjin was also afraid that the power of the nuclear bomb would be too great and directly destroy this interdimensional passage. There was no problem in destroying one tunnel. However, Tangjin would be dumbfounded if the other tunnels were destroyed as well. After all, these 5 interdimensional passages were all connected to one other world. Who knew what the other passages would do if one of them was damaged? Shut down, collapse, or be completely destroyed? If any of the above situations happened, Tangjin could only stay here forever. Who knew if he would have the chance to return to the Tower World? The risk of doing so was too great, and the consequences were unknown. He must not try it rashly. Then how could they enter the tunnel and then safely retreat? Tangjin thought for a long time but still did not come up with a perfect plan. Was there a way to deceive these foreign cultivators and enter the passage without anyone knowing? Perhaps he could find the perfect solution in the application store. As Tangjin thought of this, he immediately opened the store and began to search for applications that could help him. After searching for a moment, Tangjin saw a magical application that belonged to the category of Fantasy Secret Technique. Shape-shifting, a secret technique of the ever-changing demon race. You can control your muscles, bones, and bones to change into various appearances and auras of your race. Reference is required for shape-shifting. Download price, 100,000 brain beads. None of the uses of fantasy secret techniques were cheap. The price of 100,000 brain beads was not cheap either. It was equivalent to 1 million gold coins before the mobile phone was upgraded. In the past, Tangjin might not be able to afford it. However, the current Tangjin was extremely wealthy. 100,000 brain beads was just a small matter. After paying the brain pearl, Tangjin immediately downloaded and installed it. Following the activation of the application, Tangjin clearly felt an invisible force wrapping around his body's cells, leaving nothing behind. It was as if he had turned into a dough that could be kneaded, rounded, and flattened at will. Tangjin understood in his heart. It seemed that this was the power of application. It was indeed extremely magical. It seemed that there was no problem with the application. Next, he would begin the transformation. However, before that, Tangjin must first capture a foreign cultivator to use as a reference. Tangjin noiselessly approached the nearby passageway. He extended his hand and knocked out a foreign tribe cultivator before directly dragging him away. Tangjin carried the alien cultivator to a hidden place and used it as a reference. The appearance and aura of his body rapidly changed. In the blink of an eye, Tangjin's appearance became exactly the same as the foreign cultivator. There was no difference. Tang Jin nodded in satisfaction after checking the map view. Then, he removed all the leather armor and weapons of the foreign cultivators. After putting on the weapons and equipment, Tang Jin looked no different from those foreign cultivators. No one would recognize him. After swaying his body and walking 2 rounds, Tang Jin swaggered out of the ruins. The next thing he had to do was to find an opportunity to slip into the interdimensional passage. When they saw Tang Jin walking over, a few foreign cultivators glanced at him and then ignored him. Because the destroyers didn't come, the atmosphere around the passage wasn't very tense. Some cultivators were still chatting casually. Tang Jin walked around the tunnel for a while. When he tried to approach the tunnel, he was immediately stopped. Before the ban is lifted, no one is allowed to approach the passageway. Get lost! Tang Jin was disguised as a level 4 foreign cultivator. The one who stopped him was a level 5 foreign cultivator. When he looked at Tang Jin, his eyes were filled with disdain. Tang Jin laughed hideously. He put on a submissive appearance and hurriedly retreated to the side. How long will we have to wait? Should we force our way in? Tang Jin stood in a corner and pondered about the feasibility of forcefully attacking. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was inappropriate. After these towers received his news, they had obviously made proper arrangements, so it was very dangerous to attack by force. CHCK for US to rise on no/v/l/bin.c0m. Even though he was a 3-star horde leader, he still couldn't avoid being injured in the battle. The previous encounter in the Scarlet Qilin Tower City still left Tang Jin with a lingering fear. When he was in Jilin City, he had launched a surprise attack and caught the other party off guard. At this moment, the foreign invaders had clearly made thorough preparations. If he wasn't careful, he might fall into their trap. In that case, he could only think of another way. Tang Jin quietly retreated to the edge of the ruins when he thought of this. His body flashed and he hid. Tang Jin quickly left the sight of these foreign race cultivators and began to search around, trying to attract a group of monsters to attack the interdimensional passage. With the Shapeshift application, Tang Jin could completely transform into a monster and enter the monster's interior. Through the map view, Tang Jin quickly found the traces of a group of monsters. However, just as he was about to make a move, he suddenly saw a group of disheveled foreign cultivators rushing out of the ruins in a panic. Behind these foreign cultivators, there was a group of monsters that were in hot pursuit. However, Tang Jin frowned slightly when he clearly saw the appearance of these monsters. It turned out that among these monsters, there was actually a kind of human-shaped monster that was completely black. They moved swiftly and attacked ruthlessly, as if all the monsters were under their control. It was Tang Jin's first time seeing this kind of black human-shaped monster. He could not help but take a few more glances. Under the command of these humanoid monsters, the scattered monsters were constantly besieging and intercepting the foreign cultivators. Their combat strength had more than doubled. Tang Jin's eyes brightened when he saw the injured foreign tribe cultivators fleeing for their lives under the pursuit of the monsters. He immediately began to pull, causing his clothes and armor to become extremely messy. Immediately after, Tang Jin ran to the ruins and smeared the blood of the foreign cultivator he had killed on his body. He made it look like he had been seriously injured after a bitter battle. After completing his disguise, Tang Jin immediately ran towards the foreign race cultivators who were running for their lives. He carefully hid in the ruins at the side. As the monster continued to roar, the cultivators got closer and closer. Soon, they arrived at the place where Tang Jin was hiding. The moment these cultivators passed by, Tang Jin rushed out of the ruins like lightning and mixed into the messy group of foreign cultivators, fleeing with them. The foreign race cultivators who were in a hurry to escape were too busy to take care of themselves and didn't notice Tang Jin, who had snuck in. Under the pursuit of the monster, it was already very rare for them to be able to keep their lives. Who would care about what was happening around them? This kind of reasonable thing happened to help Tangjin a big deal. An extremely shrill scream was heard. It turned out that a foreign cultivator had been caught by the monster, and it had bitten him in two before swallowing him. Tangjin could not help but turn around and take a look when he heard this mournful scream. His eyes inadvertently met with the human-shaped monster riding on the monster. This fellow was actually a level 7 2-star horde leader. No wonder it could control so many low-level monsters. The human-shaped monster's eyes were incomparably cold and indifferent. They were filled with bloodthirst and cruelty. When it noticed Tangjin looking at it, it immediately revealed a sinister smile. However, its smile was filled with shock and contempt, as if it was looking at a group of ants. If an ordinary cultivator were to be looked at by it like this, they would probably be immediately intimidated and leave an indelible shadow in their hearts. This was an innate ability of humanoid monsters, similar to the one-eyed dragon's ability. Tangjin was not affected in the slightest. He only felt that the eyes and smile of this human-shaped monster were very annoying. Therefore, he returned a fierce glare. Unknowingly, Tangjin had used the mental energy of a 3-star horde leader. The humanoid lord monster that was smiling at Tangjin trembled and almost fell off the monster's back. When it steadied its mind and looked at Tangjin again, it discovered that the other party had already turned his head around and made an appearance of fleeing for his life. He no longer paid any attention to it. A hint of fear flashed through the human-shaped monster's eyes. It subconsciously slowed down its speed and began to follow behind these cultivators. It was also at this moment that the cultivators guarding the interdimensional passage finally noticed Tangjin and the others. Read latest chapters at n/velbi.co/m. Several hundred foreign cultivators rushed over in an attempt to receive Tangjin and the others. At the same time, various long-range weapons also landed on the group of monsters. When the human-shaped monster saw this, it immediately stopped chasing and commanded the monster to return. As it turned around, the human-shaped monster glanced at Tangjin, who had fallen to the ground with serious injuries in the distance. Its expression was extremely strange. After the monster finally left, the foreign cultivators who were still in shock fell to the ground like dead dogs. When they were running for their lives, these foreign cultivators didn't feel any pain in their bodies. All they wanted to do was not to be bitten to death by the monsters. However, after the monsters retreated, they immediately fainted as soon as they relaxed. They had been running for their lives, and their physical strength had been seriously exhausted. When the foreign cultivators saw this, they hurriedly took out items like stretchers and carried them back. Seeing the cultivators who had escaped from danger fall to the ground one after another and then be carried away, Tangjin had no choice but to faint with the crowd. Plop! As Tangjin fell to the ground with a loud thud, the foreign cultivators immediately noticed his condition. "Hey, there's another one who fainted here!" The foreign cultivator beside Tangjin roared. Then, someone carried a stretcher over and threw Tangjin on it. "Carry them back to the tower, there's no place for them to recuperate here." A lord cultivator walked over, glanced at the unconscious cultivators, and gave an order expressionlessly. After saying this, he no longer paid any attention to these cultivators and turned to leave. These non-human Lucheng respected the strong and didn't care too much about the ordinary cultivators. However, it was their duty to help the injured and return to the Lucheng to recuperate. Tangjin lay on a stretcher and leisurely arrived at the entrance of the interdimensional passage. This time, there were nearly 100 people who were injured and unconscious. They were now lining up in order, waiting to enter the passage. A foreign race cultivator passed by Tangjin and suddenly stopped in his tracks. He sized up Tangjin with a somewhat puzzled expression. "Hey, this guy looks a little familiar." Have I seen him somewhere before? When the foreign cultivator carrying the stretcher heard this, he replied in an annoyed tone, "Of course he looks familiar. They're all cultivators from the same city. I can't be sure when we've met before." The foreign cultivator guarding the passage shook his head in response. "No, I remember seeing him just now. I can't be wrong." Tang Jin, who was pretending to be unconscious, cursed in his heart. He thought, if I'm exposed, I'll be the first to cut you alive. However, this wasn't a solution. If these foreign cultivators discovered his abnormality, all his efforts would have been in vain. When Tang Jin thought of this, he immediately operated the application and adjusted the half of his face that was pressed down. Due to the stretcher's cover, the foreign cultivators beside him did not notice the obvious change in her face. A leader of the foreign cultivators happened to pass by and heard the conversation between the two. He paused for a moment and then walked over. "Are you sure you saw him at the entrance of the passage?" The leader of the cultivators pointed at the unconscious Tang Jin and asked the foreign cultivator. Given the special circumstances, the leader of the cultivators had to be careful to prevent the saboteurs from sneaking in. The foreign race cultivator who had pointed out Tang Jin hesitated for a moment when he heard this. He then said, "Leader, can I take a look?" The leader of the cultivators nodded and motioned for him to take a look. The foreign cultivator approached the stretcher and took a look. Then, he turned Tang Jin's head back to its original position. The other side of his face that had been adjusted was immediately reflected in everyone's eyes. Although the difference wasn't big, compared to before, he was a completely different person. The foreign cultivator also hesitated. The leader of the cultivators saw this and immediately asked, "Look carefully, this is our brother. He just escaped from the monster's hands, and I asked people to carry him over. So you have to tell me clearly, have you ever seen him before?" The non-human cultivator stammered and said in an uncertain tone, "It seems like Ying Luo has seen it before." The leader of the cultivators at the side was furious and scolded sternly, "If you've seen it, then you've seen it. If you've never seen it, then you've never seen it. What are you hesitating for? Answer me immediately, have you seen it before?" The foreign cultivator was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. He looked at the leader of the cultivators, who was full of killing intent, and subconsciously shouted, "My eyes must be playing tricks on me, I've never seen it before." After saying this, the foreign cultivator cursed himself in his heart for looking for trouble. The leader of the cultivators pointed at the foreign cultivator twice with a gloomy face. Then, he turned around and left. At this moment, it was the turn of the two foreign cultivators who were carrying Tang Jin into the passage. The two of them hurriedly took a few steps forward and sneered at the foreign cultivator who had pointed out Tang Jin. He even wanted to scheme against his unconscious brother who was seriously injured. This was 2F** King Wicked. The foreign cultivator who identified Tang Jin wanted to cry but had no tears. He looked at the strange eyes of the cultivators beside him and repeatedly scolded himself for being rude. He couldn't help but turn his head and look at his cultivator brother on the stretcher with a gloomy expression. However, when his gaze fell on the cultivator's face that was covered in blood, he could not help but be stunned. Only the foreign cultivator noticed that the foreign cultivator on the stretcher had a strange smile on his face before entering the passage. "Damn, are my eyes playing tricks on me again?" The foreign cultivator muttered to himself with a conflicted expression. Other than him, no one else had noticed this. Because of what had just happened, the foreign cultivator was also a little unconfident and couldn't be sure if he was seeing things. **CK his mother, do what I want, it's none of my business." In the end, the foreign cultivators decided to ignore this matter and just stand guard. Just as the foreign cultivators were no longer thinking about this matter, Tang Jin had already been carried into the interior of the foreign clan's building. Then, he was sent to a spacious hall. The hall was about 2,000 square meters in size. It was made of a fiery red building material and had all kinds of strange carvings on it. At the top, there were 12 fiery red monster sculptures suspended in iron locks. They emitted bright light from the inside, providing light for the hall. There were also many ferocious-looking statues placed near the passages around the hall, giving off a ghostly aura. The cultivators who were injured and unconscious from the monster's pursuit were all placed here. From time to time, painful moans echoed in the hall. Tang Jin looked around through the map's perspective. After confirming that no one had noticed him, he quietly got off the bed and activated the quantum invisibility light screen. U updates tnvel/buy.com. With a flash, Tang Jin rushed out of the hall and arrived at the corridor of the tower. He used his spiritual power to sense it, but there was no aura of a large number of brains gathered together. These guys really did hide their brains. Tang Jin's eyes turned for a moment before he continued to walk forward for a distance. After which, he hid in the shadows. He was prepared to grab a tongue and interrogate it to find out the location of the treasure. The identity of this tongue couldn't be too low. At the very least, it had to be a Lord Cultivator. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to know too much secret information. Not long after, a Lord Cultivator walked over with a heavy heart. Tang Jin's heart was filled with joy. The moment this Lord Cultivator approached his hiding place, he directly knocked him out and dragged him to a hidden place. After throwing the feudal Lord Cultivator to the ground, Tang Jin took out a bottle of mineral water from the storage space and poured it on the feudal lord's face. The Lord Cultivator was awakened by the cold water. After waking up, this Lord Cultivator suddenly tensed his muscles and prepared to activate his cultivation skills. At this moment, a cold voice rang in his ears. "You'd better behave yourself, or I'll send you on your way immediately." This voice seemed to contain killing intent, but it was resolute. The Lord Cultivator's heart turned cold as he confirmed that the other party was not joking. After struggling for a while, he realized that his body had been tightly bound by a green chain. Even with his Lord-tier cultivation, he could not break it. He didn't expect the green chains to be a rare Holy Master MO weapon. The Lord Cultivator was shocked. He turned to look at the hijacker in the dark and said coldly, "Who are you? What do you want? You don't need to know who I am. Now you just need to tell me, where did you hide all your brains?" The Lord Cultivator was shocked and shouted, "Damn it, you're the destroyer?" "Correct, but no reward." Tang Jin sneered in the dark and continued to speak to the Lord Cultivator, "From now on, if you say one more word of nonsense, I'll kill you immediately. Now, please answer my first question. Where did you hide all your brain beads?" The Lord Cultivator shook his head and said to Tang Jin, "I only know that the brain pearl has been hidden in a hidden location, but I don't know the exact location." Tang Jin sensed the aura of the Lord Cultivator and confirmed that he wasn't lying. "Then do you know the approximate location or the direction?" After asking this question, Tang Jin's mental energy surged out and once again firmly locked onto this Lord Cultivator. As long as the other party's reaction was a little wrong, Tang Jin could be sure whether he was lying or not. The Lord Cultivator smiled bitterly, but in order to save his life, he replied honestly, "I think it should be in the valley behind the tower, because that's the only place suitable for hiding treasures." "I didn't expect you to be so cooperative. I'm embarrassed to kill you now." Tang Jin nodded and said with satisfaction. The Lord Cultivator frowned and sighed. He looked at Tang Jin and said, "I know you have a 90% chance of killing me, but I still hope you can let me go." Tang Jin walked out from the shadows and looked down at the Overlord Cultivator. He used an ice-cold voice and said, "Give me a reason. If I'm satisfied, I won't kill you." The Lord Cultivator took a deep breath and said to Tang Jin, "I have a grudge against the city lord. I've already contacted a group of brothers and are ready to kill him. What kind of enmity is there between the two of you that makes you want to kill him? Before he became the city lord, he took advantage of his status as the young city lord and snatched away the woman I love the most. After this beast married her, he just kept abusing her. I couldn't stand it, so I went to reason with him, but in the end, that beast ran. After saying this much, the Lord Cultivator's face revealed a painful and struggling expression, as well as a strong killing intent. In the end, not only did that bastard order people to beat me up and tie me up, but he also raped her in front of me. When she was on her last breath, he personally cut her neck with a knife. When he said this, the Lord Cultivator's expression twisted like an evil ghost. He had finally gotten the chance to pour out the hatred he had suppressed for so many years. Even if the other party was a destroyer, even if the other party could take his life at any time, so what? The Lord Cultivator didn't care about these things anymore. He only needed to say the words that had been suppressed in his heart for many years. In that case, he could go down and reunite with her, and be with her forever. All these years, he felt that he had been living a very tired life. That bastard held a knife and stepped on my head, telling me that this city is his. Whoever he wants to die must die. He has long disliked me, but because of my identity, he doesn't dare to kill me. However, he can snatch my woman and kill her after he's tired of her. This bastard is using this method to take revenge on me. I'll never forget the look she gave me before she died. She doesn't care about death at all, because ever since she was robbed by that beast, she's been living a life worse than death. I'm afraid she's long had enough of living, hoo-hoo. But because of my existence, she persevered until Ingluo. At that time, we were both lying on the ground. I saw a trace of nostalgia and worry in her eyes. I'm so familiar with her eyes. When we were together, she would look at me like that whenever I was impulsive. She's telling me not to be impulsive, to live well, and not to lose my life for her. But how would she know that without her, what meaning would my life have? The Lord Cultivator was already exhausted. He clenched his fists and his eyes were bloodshot. Tang Jin inhaled a deep breath of air. He nodded and said, "Your story is not bad, although it's also very melodramatic. If that's the case, I'll let you go this time. After all, you're just an ant to me. It doesn't matter if I kill you or not. To be honest, I also hate the city lord you're talking about, so I've decided to give you something." After Tang Jin said this, he took out the star-destroying bullet that he had obtained from the Great Elder of Blood Sand City and handed it to the Lord Cultivator. At the same time, Tang Jin used the Holy Master's mental enslavement skill and began to control the Lord. From now on, you'll be plagued by painful memories every day, and these troubles will almost drive you crazy. It will also make your killing intent towards the city lord stronger and stronger. When the pain accumulates to the limit, you will feel that there is no longer any meaning in living. Then, you will take this metal ball, find the city lord, and throw it to the ground. At that time, not only can you kill the city lord, you can also be with your lover forever. The Lord Cultivator on the ground heard this and nodded with a confused look. Using the mental energy of a 3-star horde leader to control a 1-star horde leader was absolutely an easy thing for Tang Jin. What's more, this feudal Lord Cultivator had an obsession in his heart. Tang Jin had only ignited it and then threw a big barrel of oil into the fire. When he exploded, he would definitely incinerate everything around him. The only thing that Tang Jin could not be sure of was whether the star-destroying bullet would produce that strange gray fog after it exploded. If the gray fog could really be produced, the Lord Cultivator might really be able to reunite with his lover. But even so, what did it have to do with Tang Jin? What he wanted to do was to destroy a non-human city with the help of others. This city might be razed to the ground one day in the future. Tang Jin was never tired of casually burying mines. Ever since he came to the Tower World, he had done such things more than once. After keeping the tree spirit chain, Tang Jin quickly rushed out of the building and headed straight for the back valley that the Lord Cultivator had mentioned. This city had a strange appearance, resembling the head of a ferocious ghost. Its entire body was fiery red, as if it would burn at any moment. The aliens in the world of Luqing had strange thoughts and always liked to make the appearance of the Luqing look strange. Tang Jin had no energy to ridicule this. Tang Jin didn't have the mood to analyze the outsider's aesthetic thinking. He looked at the black stone pillars in front of him that were like a dead forest and strode toward the back of the building. The natural environment of this foreign tribe city was completely different from Holy Dragon City. There were many leafless red berry trees on the ground. If the Holy Dragon City area's main color was desolation, then the color of this non-human city was ferocity. The mountains were ferocious, the water was ferocious, and even the plants were ferocious. Tang Jin's expression had unknowingly become malevolent as he walked in this malevolent environment. Where did these F***king bastards hide their brains? Tang Jin looked at the surrounding terrain, which was almost the same, and could not help but curse furiously in his heart. Tang Jin felt a little dizzy after walking around this area for a while. He was unable to see anything through the map view. The other party seemed to have used some kind of shielding method, making Tang Jin unable to sense the location of his brain. Wasn't this a scam? Even if one of you comes out, I can still lock onto a certain area and search. But now, there isn't even a ghost shadow, and the surrounding area is exactly the same. How do you expect me to find it? He had no choice but to ask the App Store for help again. A few minutes later, an application was downloaded and installed by Tang Jin. High-grade treasure detector, able to detect treasures within a 10,000-meter radius, including basic treasures, medium treasures, and high-grade treasures. Download cost, 1 million brain beads. UpTed chapters nnvelben.com. 1. This was the highest version of the treasure detector. Tang Jin could be considered to have put in a lot of effort. However, as long as he could find the hidden brain, Tang Jin would not lose out. In fact, there was a basic version of the treasure detector, and the download fee was 10,000 brain beads. Unfortunately, the detection range was only 100 meters. The detection range of the basic version was too small and was not suitable for Tang Jin. Therefore, Tang Jin gritted his teeth and directly purchased the most advanced version. As the application started to run, a strange aura appeared and spread to the surroundings like water waves. An image appeared in front of Tang Jin's eyes. It was a topographic map of the surrounding 10 kilometers. Numerous ripples flitted across the map. After which, some small light spots began to appear in front of Tang Jin's eyes. They were the so-called treasures. After reading the introduction, Tang Jin had a rough understanding of the treasure detector. This detector divided the treasures into 10 levels, and from high to low, they were represented by different colors. Level 1 treasures were displayed in white on the screen, Level 2 treasures were gray, Level 3 treasures were red, and Level 10 treasures were gold. The more treasures there were, the brighter the light spots would be, allowing one to see them clearly. Apart from that, the treasure detector could also be set up with a special search mode, which could search for a certain treasure alone and block out other treasures. The advantage of doing so was that it could easily find treasures that couldn't be found by spiritual power. When Tang Jin saw this, he manually set it up. After the setup was completed, Tang Jin took out a pile of brains and scanned them all with the detector from level 1 to level 7. After doing all this, a special option for detecting the brain was set up. He took out a level 3 brain and let the detector scan it. The result showed a bunch of light spots with the number 3. He took out his level 7 brain pearl and displayed a dot of light with the number 7. After the test was successful, Tangjin immediately activated it. After which, he stared at the screen. Waves of ripples spread out, and after tens of seconds, a large number of dots with numbers suddenly appeared at the edge of the circle. Tangjin stared at the light spots, completely ignoring the scattered light spots in other places. Tangjin enlarged the large area of light and saw several 7 numbers. There's no mistake, it's that place. Tangjin was overjoyed. He immediately rushed toward that area. With Tangjin's current speed, he would not need much time to reach that region. After Tangjin stopped, a strangely shaped black stone peak entered his eyes. After confirming the location of the brain, Tangjin began to search for an entrance in the surroundings. He concluded that the brain was definitely hidden inside the stone peak. After circling around the stone peak twice, Tangjin finally discovered a hidden entrance. It was hidden behind a huge black rock. If he had not approached the entrance of the cave, Tangjin would not have discovered it at all. Tangjin stood at the entrance of the cave and sized it up before walking in. This stone cave was extremely deep. After walking for half a day, Tangjin finally heard the conversation of the foreign race cultivators. After using his spiritual power to sense and making sure that there were only 2 level 6 feudal lords and more than 10 level 5 cultivators in the cave, Tangjin no longer had any scruples. He directly drew his blade and rushed in. All the foreign cultivators were shocked when they saw Tangjin. Never in their dreams would they have thought that such a secret place would be discovered. You're a mayfly destroyer? A lord cultivator looked at Tangjin and shouted with a demon saber in his hand. That's right! Tangjin's voice had just sounded when he waved his battle blade and hacked over. After a series of battlefields, these foreign cultivators were all dead, lying on the ground in a mess. Tangjin flicked the blood off his demon weapon and strode towards the treasures on the ground. These towers and treasures were piled up like a small mountain. They were wrapped in a flexible monster skin. It was this thing that blocked the detection of mental energy, making Tangjin unable to sense the location of his brain pearl. Tangjin took out a stack of storage cards and put away all the treasures before he turned around and left the cave. Out of the 5 towers, 3 of them had been emptied out by Tangjin. Only those towers with wings and Blood Sand City were left. Next, Tangjin stealthily sneaked into the tower and quickly passed through the interdimensional passage. Under the shocked gazes of the foreign tribe cultivators, he left in a trail of dust. What Tangjin didn't expect was that the current plane was already in complete chaos and there were monsters moving everywhere. The human-shaped monsters led the other monsters out of the danger zone and began to kill the cultivators in the 5 cities in groups. This place had completely become the monsters' territory, and the earth-shaking roars of the monsters could be heard everywhere. Tangjin found it difficult to even take a single step. He had already fought with the monster over 10 times during his journey. Although Tangjin didn't suffer too much damage due to his 3-star Horde leader cultivation, the wave-like monsters still left him in a terrible fix. However, he was still quite a distance away from the interdimensional passage of the flying alien tribe. Tangjin thought for a moment. In the end, he gave up on the plan to fly to the foreign tribe's building and instead headed toward the nearest plane channel to him, Blood Sand City. After taking stock of his harvest this time, Tangjin found that he had earned a lot this time. The little gloominess in Tangjin's heart immediately disappeared when he realized this. I'll rob it again when I pass by Blood Sand City, then I'll return to Holy Dragon City. Tangjin's speed suddenly increased when he thought of this. Before he returned to the world of towers, Tangjin was prepared to give the 5 towers a big gift. He hid the 20 super fireworks in the ruins and turned on the timer. After a day, they would explode at the same time, filling this small world with radiation clouds. I wonder if the interdimensional passage will close after this super explosion. If that was the case, the 5 towers would be in deep trouble. After doing all of this, Tangjin covered up a little and began to rush in the direction of Blood Sand City. A large number of cultivators had gathered at the interdimensional passage in Bloodsand City. Due to the monster's abnormal reaction, all of the cultivators of Bloodsand City had stopped hunting monsters and returned to the interdimensional passage one after another. However, there were still nearly 30% of cultivators who did not make it back in time. They were trapped in this world forever and became the food of the monsters. When they saw Tangjin, whose face was covered in blood and his clothes and armor were in tatters, the cultivators of Bloodsand City only glanced at him and ignored him. In these few days, they had seen too many cultivators like Tangjin. Moreover, after his cultivation was suppressed, Tangjin looked like a level 4 cultivator. This would not attract the attention of others. However, there were some people who were surprised by Tangjin's good luck. He had returned so late, yet he was not killed by the monster. Tangjin expressionlessly swept his eyes around. He was extremely like a cultivator who was physically and mentally exhausted. Tangjin blended into the crowd of cultivators with different expressions and began to observe the surrounding situation. Due to the appearance of the destroyers, Bloodsand City had also strengthened its defenses, and a large number of cultivators were waiting for them. Those who didn't belong to Bloodsand City had to be carefully searched before they were allowed to enter. The two feudal lord cultivators were stationed behind the interdimensional passage, and any rogue cultivator who disobeyed their orders would be killed without hesitation. Although the cultivators were complaining, they had no choice but to obey the order and let the cultivators of Bloodsand City search them from inside to outside. Tangjin stood behind a group of cultivators according to the requirements of the cultivators of Bloodsand City. These people were all wild cultivators and were currently being inspected. The person standing in front of Tangjin was a level 4 middle-aged man. He turned his head when he heard the voice. He glanced at Tangjin behind him and grinned. "Brother, did you also just return from the ruins?" Tangjin nodded his head and deliberately revealed a depressed expression. When that wild cultivator saw this, he thought that Tangjin did not gain anything from this trip and consoled him. "There's no need to get angry, little brother. We can only admit that we're unlucky to have encountered such a thing. When I first entered this place, I was barely able to break even. Later on, I gained more experience and gradually gained something. As long as you persist for 2 years, and if you're lucky enough to survive, you'll basically be able to make it." This man was a good person. However, his words were completely useless to Tangjin. If he knew that the cultivator in front of him was the famous speaker and that he had robbed 3 treasure rooms of the non-human race, who knew what he would think? The cultivators of Bloodsand City were searching very slowly, so the two of them were chatting. At this moment, a few more cultivators rushed over from the ruins, their bodies full of killing intent. When the wild cultivator who was chatting with Tangjin saw these people, he immediately lowered his voice and said to Tangjin, "Do you see those people? They're the Bloodwolves exploration team, a rather famous team of wild cultivators. There were 5 members in this exploration team, and each of them had the strength of a level 5. Their combat power was quite strong. I heard that they have a good relationship with a noble in Bloodsand City. It won't take long for Bloodwolf to build a city. When the time comes, Bloodsand City will send cultivators to help defend against the monsters, and their city will become Bloodsand City's auxiliary city and listen to their orders." This wild cultivator knew a lot of information and told everything to Tangjin. He actually didn't know that he had unknowingly fallen into a trap. Under Tangjin's guidance, he would reveal everything he knew without holding anything back. At this moment, the 5 rogue cultivators had already come over and familiarly greeted the cultivators of Bloodsand City, showing that they had a good relationship. It seemed that the truth was as this wild cultivator had said. Their relationship with Bloodsand City was not ordinary. However, Tangjin didn't care about this. It was just a few rank 5 cultivators. He could casually kill them and they weren't a threat to him. Who would have thought that Tangjin was not willing to pay attention to these few fellows, but they took the initiative to provoke Tangjin. "Brat, get to the back!" Although the five of them had an unusual relationship with Blood Sand City, the search this time was inevitable. They saw that Tangjin's cultivation was not high and he looked very unfamiliar, so they decided to cut the queue from him. Tangjin turned around and stared at the cultivator in front of him. A cold light flashed in his eyes. A mere level 5 cultivator dared to shout at him like this. He was simply courting death. At this time, the Blood Wolf's cultivator was staring at Tangjin with a provocative look. His face was full of ridicule, as if he was waiting for Tangjin to get angry. Just as he was about to flare up, Yi Xiu, who had been chatting with him earlier, pulled Tangjin to the side. The rank 5 cultivator smiled apologetically at Tangjin and gave him a look. Tangjin suppressed the anger in his heart and followed Yi Xiu to the back of the team. After seeing Tangjin's group obediently leave, those few wild cultivators laughed and stood at Tangjin's previous position. The cultivators from Blood Sand City didn't stop them and instead began to chat with them. When the wild cultivator saw that the other party was no longer paying attention to Tangjin, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. He turned his head to Tangjin and softly said, "Do you not want to live anymore? You even dare to offend Blood Wolf? They can't do anything to you here, but once you're outside, they have 100 ways to kill you. You're still young. Listen to me. Don't let your emotions affect your decisions." Tangjin helplessly smiled when he saw the middle-aged wild cultivator's earnest and well-meaning appearance. Why would he want to compete with a few bugs that he could easily pinch to death? If it affected his plan to steal the treasure, then he would really be crying without tears. After thinking up to this point, Tangjin no longer bothered about this matter and quietly waited for the inspection. After about half an hour, it was finally Tangjin's turn to be inspected. He didn't have many things on him, and they were all ordinary items, completely in line with the identity of a level 4 wild cultivator. The two Blood Sand City cultivators in charge of the inspection didn't find anything. They tilted their heads to Tangjin, indicating that he could leave. Tangjin took out his passage token and stepped into the interdimensional passage. Perhaps after tomorrow, this passageway would no longer exist. When he arrived at the teleportation hall of Blood Sand City, Tangjin immediately saw the 5 cultivators of Blood Wolf. They were surrounding a counter, as if they were buying some equipment. After seeing Tangjin, one of the Blood Wolf cultivators revealed a sinister smile. He pointed outside and made a throat-cutting gesture. This was a blatant threat, which showed the arrogance of the Blood Wolf exploration team. They had already remembered Tangjin. Once they met him in the wilderness, they would definitely surround him and kill him. Tangjin coldly laughed. "The next time we meet, I'll let you all know the consequences of provoking this daddy." Who would kill who was still an unknown? However, the most important thing at the moment was naturally to search the treasure room in Blood Sand City. Over 10 seconds later, Tangjin revealed a mocking sneer. "Do you think I won't be able to find the treasure if you hide it? In your dreams." After Tangjin activated the application and searched around, he didn't find any information about the existence of a large number of brain beads within the scope of Blood Sand City. It was obvious that Blood Sand City had already taken precautions and hidden the treasures. This was also within Tangjin's expectations. There were only 2 possibilities that could escape the detection of the high-tier treasure detector. Either the location of the treasure was outside of the detection range, or the city used some unknown method to hide the brain and avoid the detection of the advanced treasure detector. As Holy Dragon City's enemy, Blood Sand City could not be let off easily. Therefore, the brain of Blood Sand City had to be taken away. No matter how deep it was hidden, Tangjin had to dig it out. After wandering around twice, Tangjin took advantage of the fact that the cultivators of Blood Sand City weren't paying attention to him and directly entered a passage. When Tang Jin came out again, he had already changed his appearance. He had changed into an ordinary civilian's clothing and no longer had the aura of a cultivator. The current Tang Jin looked just like an ordinary resident of Bloodsand City. There was nothing special about him. He slowly walked up the stairs and passed by some residents of Bloodsand City. It didn't take long for him to reach the residential area of Bloodsand City. Tang Jin was currently in a huge space that was at least 10,000 square meters. This was the internal shopping mall of Bloodsand City. The sound of bargaining and shouting could be heard constantly, and the residents of Bloodsand City were constantly coming and going. Tang Jin pretended to be taking a stroll as he walked past the stalls and arrived at a pub not long later. Tang Jin's heart moved as he looked at the diners in the pub who were talking with fervor and assurance. He then walked inside. Explore new ovals on nvelbuy.com. After choosing a clean table and sitting down, Tang Jin ordered a set of wine and dishes. He ate while listening to the conversations of the surrounding residents. From the mouths of these drinking residents, one could hear a lot of gossip. At that moment, out of the 10 tables in the tavern, 5 of them were occupied. They were drinking and chatting. The content of their conversation was very complicated, nothing more than some trivial matters. Tang Jin listened for a long time, but he did not have the information he wanted. Obviously, for these ordinary residents, the matter of treasure was too high-end and not at the level that they could come into contact with. However, Tang Jin was not in a hurry. He merely slowly drank his wine with a leisurely and carefree expression. 2 hours later, a few cultivators from Bloodsand City entered the tavern. While they were waiting for the food and wine, the cultivators of Bloodsand City began to whisper to each other. A thin cultivator from Bloodsand City looked around and whispered to his 3 companions, "Hey, did you guys hear? That invader robbed a treasure room in a foreign race's building and killed several feudal lord cultivators." His words obviously aroused the interest of the other 3, and they began to talk. "I heard that the saboteur's strength is very high. He's at least a 2-star horde leader. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to kill so many 1-star horde leaders." "You don't need to say that, this is an obvious thing. So far, this destroyer has already stolen the treasures of 3 towers. Only the Xiaoyu Tower and our Bloodsand City are fine. Do you think the destroyer will come to our place? I don't think we can escape. Didn't you see that the entrance is heavily guarded? Even the 2 Lord cultivators who are cultivating in seclusion are personally guarding it. It's to prevent any destroyers from appearing. To be honest, if it wasn't for the appearance of the saboteurs this time, I really wouldn't have known that there were so many Overlord cultivators hidden in our Bloodsand City." After saying this, the 4 cultivators of Bloodsand City sighed. This destroyer was indeed not simple. He had actually forced Bloodsand City to use its trump card. At this moment, the food and wine were served. The 4 cultivators stopped their conversation and began to eat and drink. The corner of Tang Jin's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. Originally, he only wanted to try his luck. He did not expect that he had made the right choice by coming to this tavern. Now, he had to wait until the 4 cultivators were drunk before he could listen to their conversation. After a while, the 4 cultivators of Bloodsand City began to chat again. A bare-armed cultivator placed his wine cup on the table and sighed, "Since this destroyer is so powerful and has killed so many Overlord cultivators, do you think our Bloodsand City can stop him?" Tang Jin had been observing the surroundings through the map's perspective the entire time. After hearing the 4 cultivators' words, he immediately perked up his ears. At the same time, Tang Jin also glanced at that cultivator's arm. That was because it was covered with densely packed tattoos. This was not an ordinary tattoo, but a special cultivator skill. After learning the skill, the monster's blood essence had to be integrated into the body. After the successful fusion, the monster tattoo would appear on the surface of the cultivator's body. Cultivators who mastered this skill could borrow the ability of the fused monster in battle and even have a part of the beast transformation. If a cultivator had the blood essence of a powerful monster and successfully fused with it, then the cultivator's combat power would be very terrifying when using this skill. A cultivator from the Holy Dragon City had exchanged for this skill and successfully fused with the blood essence of a Class 5 tortoiseshell beast killed by Mo Ran. Once this cultivator used a skill, a translucent turtle shell would appear on the surface of his body, giving him an extremely amazing defensive power. The cultivator's combat strength had more than doubled. Even Tang Jin had the thought of killing a high-level monster and fusing its blood essence after seeing this cultivator's demonstration. However, Tang Jin was quickly attracted by the contents of the conversation between these cultivators and listened carefully. I don't think so either. With that saboteur's style, it's very likely that he'll charge into our Bloodsand City. If that's the case, then our treasure room will be in danger. You guys don't have to worry about that. The city lord must have a way to deal with it. That saboteur definitely won't succeed, and he might even be killed by us. After saying this, one of the cultivators looked around and waved his hand after making sure that no one was paying attention to him. The other 3 cultivators saw this and leaned forward, their foreheads leaning together. I heard from my uncle that even if the destroyers really rushed in, they wouldn't be able to find the treasure. Because our Bloodsand City's treasures are all in the hands of a super expert in Lu City. When the other 3 heard this, the doubt on their faces grew even stronger. There were so many treasures that were as big as a small mountain. How could he possibly carry them on him? After the 4 cultivators said this, they changed the topic. However, the rest of the content was already meaningless to Tang Jin. He got up, paid the bill and left. Tang Jin slowly walked out of the pub. When he heard the cultivator say that the treasure was on the body of the so-called super expert, Tang Jin knew that Bloodsand City had placed those brain beads there. They must have used some method to obtain the storage application card and then put away all the treasures in the treasure room. A few thin cards were extremely inconspicuous, and they didn't take up much space. No one would have thought that all the treasures of Bloodsand City were hidden inside. Next, he just had to find the so-called number 1 master of Bloodsand City and snatch the storage card from his hands. As for the storage card's password, it was not a problem for Tang Jin. As the only provider of the storage card, Tang Jin could remove the secret of the card in the blink of an eye. This was the backdoor that the application store had left for him in case he forgot his password and couldn't use it normally. Now was the perfect time to use it. He slowly walked up the stairs of Bloodsand City. It didn't take long for him to cross the residential area and arrive at the floor where ordinary residents were forbidden from entering. At this moment, Tang Jin had changed his appearance and disguised himself as a cultivator from Bloodsand City. After hanging Liu Chang's badge on his chest, Tang Jin swaggered up under the guard's eyes. Compared to the noisy residential area, the area where the cultivators were located was much quieter. Tang Jin walked for half a day before he met 2 cultivators from Bloodsand City who were in a hurry. When he passed by these 2 cultivators, the other party glanced at Tang Jin with a trace of doubt in his eyes. However, the 2 of them clearly had something important to do, so they didn't stop to investigate and continued to rush forward. What the 2 cultivators of Bloodsand City didn't know was that it was because they hadn't meddled in the matter that they had managed to keep their lives. Tang Jin would kill any potential danger that might expose his identity at the first moment. After walking forward for a distance, Tang Jin stopped. This was because an intersection with the same appearance appeared in front of him. Tang Jin took a deep breath and used his mental energy to sense the surroundings. After that, he walked toward a pitch-black corridor. In this direction, Tang Jin sensed an aura that was deliberately suppressed. It was not obvious, but it was obvious that it was a cultivator whose cultivation was second only to his. Discover W stories on no/e/lbin.com. If Tangjin's guess was correct, this person should be the super expert that the cultivators of Bloodsand City had mentioned. The light in this passage was very dim, and because of the lack of illuminating crystals, it gave people the feeling that they were walking in a cave. Only the sound of Tangjin's footsteps reverberated in the empty tunnel. Two human figures suddenly walked out from the darkness and blocked in front of Tangjin. The forbidden area ahead is off limits, a black figure coldly said. At the same time, he sized up Tangjin. His eyes flickered with a faint red light in the dark environment. Go back immediately, or you'll be killed without mercy. The black shadow did not hold back when he spoke to an ordinary level 4 cultivator. The other black figure looked at Tangjin without saying a word. There was a trace of bloodlust in his eyes, as if he was a vicious wolf hidden in the darkness. It was as though Tangjin did not hear their orders as he continued to walk forward. You're looking for death. The cultivator who gave the order snorted coldly and shot out like a bolt of lightning. A withered hand grabbed at Tangjin's throat. The moment he attacked, he would aim for a vital point. Once he succeeded, the person who was attacked would either die or be injured. It was obvious that this cultivator did not intend to hold back and planned to give Tangjin an unforgettable lesson. However, just as his finger was about to touch Tangjin, a strong wind sounded out and directly attacked the lower abdomen of that cultivator. The cultivator's expression changed. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. Ka-ba! A crisp sound rang out as Tangjin's kick landed on the cultivator's stomach. The force of the kick reached the back of the cultivator's waist and completely broke it. The cultivator who was attacking Tangjin was stunned. His face was filled with disbelief and the ferocity in his eyes turned into fear. Pa-da! The cultivator's body fell limply to the ground, dead. The other cultivator, who had been silent the whole time, narrowed his eyes and unsheathed a long, thin, fiery red saber. This cultivator's body trembled and he had already pounced in front of Tangjin. His battle saber directly slashed down. Good blade, I want it. Tangjin's eyes brightened. He grabbed the cultivator's wrist and pulled with all his might. The cultivator screamed miserably. His entire arm had been forcefully torn off by Tangjin, causing blood to spurt out. Tangjin casually held the demon weapon battle blade that was made from blood crystals in his hand. He sized it up and revealed a satisfied expression. MO weapons made from blood crystals were indeed sharp. Noisy, go to hell! A blood-red light flashed, and the screaming cultivator covered his neck and fell to the ground with a face full of unwillingness. Tangjin lifted his blood crystal battle blade and turned his head to look at the darkness. You've been watching for so long and you still haven't shown yourself. Do you want me to invite you out? Tangjin's voice had just sounded when a figure fluttered out. It was emitting a faint glow in the dark tunnel. This was an old man. He was looking at Tangjin with an expressionless face. His body appeared to be in a semi-transparent state. The aura of a 2-star horde leader slowly dodged. Good skill, are you the destroyer? The old man's voice seemed to have come from the netherworld, carrying a trace of cold chi that made people's scalps numb. Tangjin curiously sized up the other party. Soon after, his face revealed a disdainful expression. I was still wondering what was so special about that so-called super expert. I didn't expect him to be a spirit body old ghost. That's right, I'm the destroyer, so hurry up and take out Liu Chang's treasure, or I'll kill all of Bloodsand City. The spirit body old man's translucent face showed a hint of mockery and he snorted coldly, Sir, you sure have big words. Do you think that my Bloodsand City is like those foreign races buildings that you can bully? I can see that you're also a human cultivator, and your cultivation level is similar to mine. If we fight, neither of us will have an easy time. So please return, and we'll mind our own business. How about that? Tangjin tilted his head and looked at the old man as he sneered. Our cultivation levels are similar. Are you blind? As soon as he finished speaking, the aura of a 3-star cultivator surged out from Tangjin's body and directly attacked the spirit body old man. The spirit body old man's expression changed drastically. He pointed at Tang and said in shock, "This aura. You're actually a 3-star horde leader. Could it be that you came from a high-grade city far away? With such a cultivation, why are you bullying me?" The spirit body old man calmed the shock in his heart. His eyes rolled as he coldly said to Tangjin, "I believe you have already seen that I am a spirit body cultivator. Ordinary weapon skills can't harm me at all. Even if you are a 3-star horde leader, I'm afraid you can't do anything to me." After having something to rely on, the spirit body old man was much more confident. Although there were many disadvantages to being a spirit body cultivator, and one had to be a Lord tier cultivator to change their cultivation, they also had a great advantage. They could become invisible and ordinary weapons couldn't hurt them at all. However, Tangjin, who was in front of the old man, just happened to have a sharp technique that specialized in restraining spirit bodies. However, Tangjin was not in a hurry to attack the spirit body old man. Instead, he coldly asked, "Let me ask you, do you know a 2-star horde leader by the name of Broly?" The spirit body elder's expression changed slightly. After musing for a moment, the old man looked at Tangjin and said, "You know Broly? Did you go to the metal wreckage?" Tangjin nodded. It seemed like the answer was already very obvious. Not only did this old man know Broly, but he was also one of Broly's teammates. He was the human cultivator who had escaped that year. Tangjin's face revealed a cold expression after he thought of this. He said to the old man, "So, the City Lord of Colossal Bone City and the Grand Elder of Blood Sand City are your juniors?" The old man's face revealed a cold glint. He stared at Tangjin for a moment before suddenly saying, "Could it be that you're the Holy Dragon City's backer? No wonder they're so powerful. They're only rank 3, yet they dare to challenge our Blood Sand City. They've also produced an endless stream of new items. With a 3-star horde leader as his backing, all of this is within reason." After a short pause, the old man continued, "They are indeed the children of one of my women. However, since they have offended the Holy Dragon City, which you protect, they deserve to die. Why don't we each take a step back and let this matter go?" This old man was also afraid of Tangjin's strength. Otherwise, how could he let the matter rest so easily? Tangjin gently glanced at the old man. After letting out a cold snort, his left hand formed the shape of a sword and brushed over the blade of the blood crystal battle blade. A strange rune began to appear on the blade of the blood crystal saber, giving off an aura that made the old man tremble in fear. "What is this Yingluo? Who are you?" The old man involuntarily asked Tangjin as he looked at the demon killing rune that continuously flickered on the blood crystal battle blade. "Who? Of course it's the person who killed you." Tangjin sinisterly laughed. He raised his battle blade and charged towards the old man. His speed was shockingly fast. "Ah!" The spirit body old man screamed and drilled into the wall. However, he was still a bit too slow and was hit on the back by the blood crystal saber. The demon-killing rune glowed. The old man let out a blood-curdling screech, and his spirit body almost collapsed. He quickly turned invisible and disappeared. Boom! Tangjin held the blood crystal battle blade in his hand and kicked a large hole in the wall before stepping in without the slightest hesitation. Tangjin's eyes slightly narrowed after he passed through the large hole. This was a hall that was more than 1,000 square meters in size. It was extremely dark inside, and there were no entrances or exits. It did not look like a place for people to stay at all. Without a doubt, this should be the cultivation room of the old spirit body ghost. Old man, do you think I can't do anything to you after you become invisible? Tang Jin coldly snorted and instantly activated the spirit body detector. The pitch-black room in front of him immediately changed its appearance. Everywhere was a ghastly green, and wisps of black gas floated around. Less than 20 meters away from Tang Jin, the old spirit body was looking at him with a venomous gaze. He was holding a dagger that was nearly transparent in his hand. Tang Jin turned around and stared unblinkingly at the old man. He revealed a mocking smile. The old man's face turned pale with fright. Just as he was about to dodge, he saw the blood crystal battle blade in Tang Jin's hand rapidly shoot out and directly nail the spirit body old man to the wall. A pained expression appeared on the old man's face. From the wound that was pierced by the blood crystal battle sword, black gas kept floating up. Why don't you run? Let's see if I can catch you. Tang Jin stood on the ground. He looked at the struggling spirit body old man in the air and coldly asked. Please don't kill me, I'll give you the storage card. The old man felt Tang Jin's killing intent and hurriedly begged for mercy. Then take it out, save me some time. When the old man heard this, he quickly reached for his waist, but a cold light flashed in his eyes. He took out a few storage cards and handed them to Tang Jin. Just as Tang Jin's attention was focused on the card, a cold light shot out from the old man's fingertip. It was the transparent dagger. This was a dagger specially made for spirit body cultivators. It could ignore any physical defense and directly harm the soul of the victim. However, just as the dagger was about to pierce Tang Jin, he strangely disappeared. The dagger also passed through the air and directly stabbed into the ground. The old man was startled. He was just about to withdraw his dagger when Tang Jin's ice-cold voice suddenly sounded by his ear. I knew you didn't have good intentions, so you should be on your way, Ying Luo. A saber that was also engraved with demon-killing runes slashed across the old man's neck, and endless black chi spurted out from his wound. The old man's eyes bulged, and after struggling a few times, he lowered his head. Tang Jin pulled out the blood crystal battle blade and the old man's body softly fell to the ground. After picking up the storage card, Tang Jin glanced at the old man's corpse. After thinking for a moment, he also kept it in his storage space. After walking out of the large hole in the quiet room, Tang Jin returned to his previous attire. He came to a window and directly jumped down. Bang! Tang Jin landed on the ground steadily. He sized up his surroundings before he walked toward the Wanderer Market. He walked to the market and took out the mount that he had left behind. Then, Tang Jin slowly walked towards the wilderness. Not long after Tang Jin left, the 5 cultivators of the Blood Wolf exploration team also walked out with their mounts and ran in the direction that Tang Jin had disappeared in. The desire for revenge of these 5 people was extremely strong. Although they were only glared at by Tang Jin at the entrance of the interdimensional passage, it still caused them to put Tang Jin on their must-kill list. They were bloodthirsty by nature and would always find all kinds of reasons to kill low-level cultivators to satisfy their perverted desires. Tang Jin wasn't the first cultivator that they had their eyes on, but he was definitely the last. This was because ever since they had set their sights on Tang Jin, they were destined to never return. It did not take long for Tang Jin, who was riding his mount to gallop, to discover the 5 people chasing after him. A trace of killing intent surfaced on his face. There's a way to heaven, but you refuse to take it. There's no door to hell, but you chose to throw yourself into it. Since you're so eager to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Thinking up to this point, Tang Jin abruptly stopped his mount and turned around to look at the cultivators of the Blood Wolf exploration team. In the blink of an eye, the 5 of them rushed forward and surrounded Tang Jin. The cultivator who had chased Tangjin away at the entrance of the interdimensional passage laughed sinisterly and spat at Tangjin. Damn it, why don't you run? Why did you stop? Isn't it good that I stopped? It saves you guys the trouble of chasing me. Tangjin replied with a smile that was not a smile. Bullsh *T. It's only interesting when I chase you until you can't run anymore and then beg for mercy. The Blood Wolf cultivator's face twitched in anger. Tangjin nodded and curiously asked, "What will you do after I beg for mercy?" Hearing Tangjin's question, a strange expression appeared on the faces of the 5 Blood Wolf cultivators. After looking at each other, they burst into laughter. This kid is interesting, really interesting. I can't wait to see him beg for mercy. A fierce-looking Blood Wolf cultivator laughed wildly and said to the cultivator who had a conflict with Tangjin, "Since this kid is so curious, old 5, tell him about it. Let's see if he'll wet his pants." Ha 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 ha. The 5 of them laughed at the same time, appearing to be unscrupulous. The Blood Wolf cultivator who was called Old 5 sneered at Tangjin and loudly said, "Listen up, kid, don't get distracted. After we capture you, we will strip you of your clothes and smear some monster's blood on you." This kind of blood was very strange. After it dried up, your white and tender skin would crack piece by piece, and you would cry for your parents in pain. After that, we will peel off the human skin. When we peel off a piece, you will wail in pain. TSK, that feeling is as painful as you want. At this point, the 5th brother licked his lips, his face full of excitement and bloodlust. After your skin is completely peeled off, we will throw you out of the blood sand ants' nest and watch them crawl all over your body. Then, we will release the rope on your feet. Do you know the blood sand ants? They have extremely hard shells and are very fond of eating fresh meat. Although they are only the size of grass seeds, once they encounter enough food, they will eat until they are the size of eggs before they stop eating. Next, you would run like crazy, but your body would be full of blood sand ants that had burrowed into your skin and flesh. They would eat your flesh and make you roll on the ground in pain, but you couldn't crush them to death. Not to mention that your skin and flesh had been peeled off, and when the exposed fresh meat touched the ground when you rolled, it would also hurt so much that you would rather die. In the end, your body will be filled with large holes and you will lose it in extreme pain. At this point, the 5th brother's body began to tremble. Just by describing the process of the torture, he was already so excited that he was about to collapse. The other 4 people were also excited and laughed non-stop. At this moment, a cold snort was heard. "Are you done? I can't wait to try it after hearing what you said." Tangjin's eyes were filled with killing intent. His expression was as cold as ice. Looking at the expressions of the 5 people, it was clear that many people had been killed by these bastards. Sensing Tangjin's anger, the 5 of them stopped their wild laughter. They faintly sensed that something was amiss. The 5th brother licked his lips and said coldly, "Brat, since you're in such a hurry to die, I'll fulfill your wish." Tangjin shook his head. He looked at the other party and said, "You're wrong. It's not me who's going to die, it's the 5 of you." The 5 people's expressions changed drastically when they heard this. They looked at Tangjin in a dumbfounded manner. The aura of the level 4 wild cultivator in their eyes changed, and then continued to rise. A level 5, 2-star lord, a 3-star lord. An aura that caused their souls to tremble was emitted from Tangjin's body and firmly locked onto the 5 of them. The cruel expressions on the 5 people's faces completely froze. Endless fear surged from the bottom of their hearts, and their eyes were full of shock and regret. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that this young level 4 wild cultivator was actually a 3-star horde leader who had concealed his aura. This is what you call a real scam. Even if you want to pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger, you can't play like this. At this point, the 5 of them had already realized that they would definitely die today. Wanting to kill a 3-star horde leader and even telling him the entire process, this was simply courting death. However, these 5 people were brutal by nature. They were cruel to others, but even more so to themselves. Even now, he still wanted to fight for his life. However, before the 5 of them could take action, Tang Jin had already taken the lead. Read latest OVLS at nv/e/l/buy.com. A green light flew out from Tang Jin's hand. After which, it swiftly elongated and firmly bound the 5 of them. Plop! The 5 of them fell into the dust and cursed continuously. The fear on their faces became more and more intense. The cultivators of the Bloodwolf tribe, who had once struck fear into the hearts of the wild cultivators near Bloodsand City, had now become pigs waiting to be slaughtered. A cold wind blew, messing up the hair on Tang Jin's forehead. The temperature in the wildlands was getting lower and lower. Tang Jin ignored the 5 Bloodwolf cultivators who were cursing and howling. He turned to look at the black stone pillar not far away and softly said, "Stop hiding and come out." As soon as he finished speaking, a flurry of footsteps could be heard. Then, a group of wild cultivators walked out from behind the stone pillars. The person in the lead was the middle-aged cultivator who had tried to persuade Tang Jin at the interdimensional passage. The scene earlier had been seen by this group of wild cultivators, and they also knew Tang Jin's true identity. How could the rogue cultivators, who usually didn't dare to speak loudly when they saw a 1-star feudal lord, dare to be impudent in front of a 3-star feudal lord? At this moment, they were all trembling with fear, afraid that they would attract Tang Jin's anger. The middle-aged cultivator was even more apprehensive. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that the young man who acted on impulse in his eyes was actually a 3-star horde leader. A 3-star horde leader was an existence that the wild cultivators didn't even dare to think about. But now, he had actually appeared in front of them. Find new Tories on nov/elbin.com. You can't judge a book by its cover, it really wasn't just empty talk. The middle-aged cultivator recalled his encounter with Tang Jin. After confirming that he had not offended the other party in any way, he walked over with a face full of smiles. "Greetings, my lord." Following the middle-aged cultivator's bow, the other rogue cultivators quickly followed suit, appearing to be very respectful. "All right, you don't have to be so polite." Tang Jin nodded and looked at the middle-aged cultivator. "What are you doing here?" "Who are they?" The middle-aged cultivator quickly replied, "After I came out from the other plane, I felt that something was wrong. It was as if something big was going to happen there. That was why I decided not to go to another dimension. Instead, I went to Holy Dragon City to try my luck. I heard from a few of my old brothers that life there was much better than in Bloodsand City. These few people are the children left behind by my dead brothers. They are young and ignorant, and their cultivation is not high. It's a coincidence that we met you, a real coincidence." After the middle-aged wild cultivator said this, he was afraid that Tang Jin would misunderstand, so he quickly explained. Tang Jin smiled. He waved his hand, indicating that the middle-aged man did not need to be nervous. Although his hands were stained with blood, he was not a madman who would kill anyone he saw. The middle-aged cultivator was obviously overthinking. To be able to sense that something was wrong with the plane meant that this person's intuition was very accurate. No wonder he had lived for so long even though his strength was not high. It's definitely a wise move for you to go to Holy Dragon City, because it's indeed much more powerful than Bloodsand City. I have some connections with the Holy Dragon City City Lord and can make your life in the Holy Dragon City much easier. I'll give you a note later, you just have to hand it to the person in charge of the commercial district, and he will make proper arrangements for you. The middle-aged cultivator was overjoyed, and the low-level cultivators behind him couldn't help but look happy. To be able to get the recommendation of a 3-star lord, the person in charge of the commercial district definitely wouldn't dare to neglect and would arrange a good job for them. This favor was too great. The middle-aged cultivator was also someone with a clear mind. He knew that it was not easy to accept the favor of these big shots. Therefore, after hesitating for a moment, he bowed to Tang Jin again. These 5 bastards have committed many evil deeds and killed countless innocent wanderers. Today, they even dared to offend the Lord. Please allow me, Elder Su, to take revenge for the innocent cultivators who died. Tang Jin looked at Elder Su with a smile that was not a smile and nodded slightly. It was indeed not good for him to do this with his current identity if it was spread out. This old lady Su was clear-eyed and proposed to do it for Tang Jin, which avoided Tang Jin's embarrassment. After getting Tang Jin's permission, Elder Su immediately walked in front of the Blood Wolf cultivator and gave him a fierce kick. The Blood Wolf cultivator, who was in pain, looked at Elder Su and scolded, "Elder Su, are you tired of living? How dare you kick me? Do you believe that I will kill your entire family?" Elder Su snorted and looked at the Blood Wolf cultivator, who was covered in dust. "You're about to die, yet you still dare to say such harsh words. You're indeed worthy of being blood wolves. Each of you is cruel and unscrupulous. Back then, you tortured my brother to death. You tortured him for 3 days before you killed him. Don't think I don't know. Don't worry, I'm a famous member of the Blood Wolf exploration team. I'll take care of you. I'll slowly kill you later so that you can live a little longer, Ying Luo." The 5 Blood Wolf cultivators' expressions changed. They knew that the longer they lived, the more suffering they would suffer. After hearing Elder Su's words, they began to curse. Elder Su acted as if he didn't hear their curses. He pulled out a dagger and cut off all the tendons of the 5 people. Blood soaked through the 5's armor. From this moment on, the Blood Wolf cultivator was completely crippled. The aboriginals of the world of Lucheng fought against the heavens and earth, and there was a ruthlessness in their bones. It was fine if Elder Su did not attack, but once she did, the Blood Wolf cultivator would have no chance of resisting. Tang Jin waved his hand and retrieved the tree spirit chain. He expressionlessly looked at the 5 Blood Wolf cultivators who were constantly struggling. Elder Su called out to the young cultivators and quickly stripped them of their clothes and armor. The equipment of these 5 people was good, and the Lord would definitely not like it, so it would naturally benefit Old Lady Su and the others. Just these clothes, armor, and weapons alone were worth at least 100,000 brain beads. Elder Su and the others had made a big profit. As long as one followed the right boss, it was easy to get rich. Elder Su turned around and glanced at Tang Jin. After seeing him nod slightly, he happily ordered the spoils of war to be kept. Then, he turned to look at the 5 Blood Wolf cultivators. He tore off a leather bag from the Blood Wolf cultivator's mount and opened it. After taking a look, he smeared the stinky blood on the 5 people. The 5 of them trembled in fear. They had seen this kind of scene countless times, but in the past, they had always been the ones smearing it for others. However, when it was their turn to be smeared today, 3 out of the 5 of them had already peed their pants. "Elder Su, just kill me. Don't apply it, get lost. Please, don't apply it anymore. I beg you, Ying Luo." Elder Su was unmoved. He carefully applied the blood to the spot, and a hint of joy appeared on his wrinkled face. In just a few minutes, his body temperature had dried up his blood. The Blood Wolf cultivator's skin rapidly contracted and then, like the bottom of a dried lake, quickly cracked. The Blood Wolf cultivator, whose body was black and full of cracks, began to wail continuously. He wanted to bite his tongue to commit suicide, but Old Lady Su forced a stone into his mouth and blocked his mouth. "Zhu Zi, I have avenged you today. If you are in heaven, open your eyes and see. Look at how I'm going to kill these bastards and take revenge for your entire family. After Elder Su said this, he pulled at the cracked skin of a blood wolf cultivator. A palm-sized piece of human skin was torn off by Elder Su. The blood wolf cultivator roared in pain, but he couldn't make a sound because of the stone. He could only roll his eyes. Tang Jin listened to the screams in his ears and looked at the blood wolf cultivator being tortured in the hands of old lady Su and the others. However, there were no waves in his heart. Tang Jin would never have the slightest bit of pity for this kind of animal that deserved to die. If Tang Jin was an ordinary wild cultivator, the person lying on the ground in a fate worse than death should be him. If he didn't want to be slaughtered, the only way was to keep getting stronger, so strong that all his enemies would feel fear and flee at the sight of him. Tang Jin was like this, and so was the Holy Dragon City. Well, truckers, that's all for this part. See you all in the next video.